will call this City Council meeting to order on September the 4th. We are going to ask Lane Carter to please lead us in prayer this morning.
All will bow with me. Lord, I want to thank you for this day that you've given us, for all of us to gather together in a meeting with the City Council of San Angelo. And I pray that you give us guidance, give us wisdom, and let us do your will, for your will be done. This agenda will affect so many people today that we need to just make the right decision, and I ask for your guidance. Lord, I thank you for this rain that you've given us, and I pray that you send us more, for we surely need it. And thank you for these lighter temperatures that you've sent us. Lord, I thank you for everybody here present, and I pray that you just watch over us and give us guidance. And I pray these things in your name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
This morning we have the San Angelo Lakers organization. I think there's a series of 11-year-olds who want to come up here. Michael Robinson, Jordan Sellers, Joseph Saldago, and Isaac Harding. Would you please come forward?
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Our proclamation this morning is a proclamation of September as National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Do I have someone in the audience? Please come forward. How are you today? Good. Come on. How are you? Look at you. Come on. We need some of these up here. Good morning. Families, caregivers, charities, and research groups across the United States, as well as our national government, are observing the month of September as National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month to memorialize the young lives that have been taken too soon and to honor those fighting and those that have survived but yet face major health challenges associated with this disease. Approximately 13,500 children under the age of 18 will be diagnosed with cancer in 2018, and approximately 1 in 5 children diagnosed with cancer will die within the first 5 years. Childhood cancer is the leading cause of death among children under the age of 18, according to the most recent statistics provided the Centers for Disease Control. While progress against some childhood cancers has been made, cure rates for many forms of childhood cancer remain less than 50%. The incidence of childhood cancers is increasing at a more rapid rate than any other age group and crosses all racial, ethnic, geographic, and social backgrounds. Finally, gold has been the official ribbon color for childhood cancer awareness since 1977. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2018 as National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in San Angelo, Texas, and urge all citizens to wear gold to show their support and to honor their children fighting the fight, their families, and caregivers, the researchers and healthcare professionals, concerned citizen advocates, and private philanthropies which collaborate to provide hope and assistance to the children and their families affected by childhood cancer. Sign this, and then we're going to have you speak.
City Council. My name is Becky Powers, and I am
honored again this year to accept this proclamation on behalf of these families and others in the Concho Valley who have been impacted by childhood cancer. I am speaking today as a representative of Turn It Gold, a foundation started by my cousin Angela, who is a San Angelo native, and her husband Mike, after their son Charlie was diagnosed in May of 2012 with stage 4 high-risk neuroblastoma at the age of 4. Today, Charlie is cancer-free. However, because children who survive their initial cancer diagnosis face an 8-time higher risk of future disease due to their treatments, Charlie's fight does continue. You heard some of the facts about childhood cancer in the reading of the proclamation. Sadly, these facts have remained much the same over the past 4 years in which San Angelo has proclaimed September as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Childhood cancer remains the leading cause of death of our children under the age of 18. Yet in spite of that fact, childhood cancer research remains seriously underfunded, with only 4% of the National Cancer Research budget being designated for research of all types of childhood cancer. So the goal of Turn It Gold is simple. We want to enable a cure for childhood cancer. We are working toward this by taking a two-arm approach to funding research. We want to fight for the children who have yet to be diagnosed, those who are currently battling, and the ones who have survived. To this end, we donate funds through the Children's Oncology Group for Cancer Research and the Greehey Children's Cancer Research Institute at the UT Health Science Center in San Antonio for long-term survivorship research. So September is National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. This is our opportunity as a city to honor children and families affected by this disease. But it's time that action surpasses mere awareness. Action means moving the needle and changing the lives by rallying support for groundbreaking research that can save our kids' lives. Together, we have the power to turn it gold. We have the power to turn loss into life. We can transform the research. Together, we can turn childhood cancer awareness into more childhood cancer research. Join us as we turn it gold. One way you can do this is to pick up a gold ribbon like this from the back table, take it home, tie it around a tree or your mailbox. Feel free to take an extra for a friend or a neighbor who'd be willing to do the same. I've also left some gold ribbon stickers and information cards, as well as my contact information. If your business or organization would like to partner with us to turn it gold, please don't hesitate to contact me. I would welcome the opportunity to share our mission with you and to have you join us. Now I would like you to meet these families who are here with us today.
My name is Brooke Gomez, and my granddaughter lost her battle last year, Alyssa Gomez, due to medulloblastoma, which is brain cancer. So please help us turn San Angelo gold. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Weiss. This is my daughter, Journey. She's 4 years old, but when she was 8 weeks old, she was diagnosed with neuroblastoma. She is cancer-free today, and we just ask that you help spread the word and help turn it gold.
I am Cheyenne Hollick. Our daughter Hadley Hollick was diagnosed with a type of rare brain cancer called ATRT when she was 6 months old, and she lost her battle with cancer at 16 months old. And we appreciate the support to turn it gold.
I'm sure like everybody else in the audience, after hearing the stories and understanding what people go through, that what we do today kind of seems minor, doesn't it?
Yes.
I would ask that everyone please put your cell phones on silent. We are going to go into public comment. Issues or items that are not on the agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, begin by stating their name, and limit remarks to less than 3 minutes. Council members may request that a discussed item be placed on a future agenda. The council takes public comment on all regular agenda items during the discussion of those items. I would ask if there's any public comment today. Would anybody like to come forward and share with us? With no public comment, we will move into the consent agenda. I will ask each council member if there's anything they would like to pull from the consent agenda. Tommy?
No, ma'am.
Tom?
No, ma'am.
Gary?
No, ma'am.
Lucy? Lane?
No, ma'am.
Billy?
Yes. Item C, Mayor.
Okay. With item C being pulled from the consent agenda, may I please have a motion to accept all items with the exception of C, please?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. We will now go into item C. Consider acceptance of a non-warranty deed conveying to the city of San Angelo the following properties. 1, park area is designated out of Block 3, Section 1, Meadow Creek Addition. Park area is designated out of Block 6, Section 1, Meadow Creek Addition. Park 3 is designated out of Block 6, Section 4, Meadow Creek Addition. Park area is designated out of Block 10, Section 5, Meadow Creek Addition. And 5, park area is designated out of Block 22, Section 8, Meadow Creek Addition. Cindy, you're on. Billy, do you have a question for her?
I do. Cindy, good morning.
Good morning.
Since the computers are down, I can't read specifically, but it was, when I was reading the background material, there was a statement talking about the conveyance of the deed to the city of San Angelo.
Yes, ma'am.
And then there was an additional statement that said the tax appraisal district showed that the city owned the property. So my question is, who would be deeding these properties to the city if the tax roll said the city already owns them? I didn't understand that.
The lots were actually part of a plat, and the plat identifies the lots as park. There was another park area, a lot, that was actually deeded to an adjacent property owner by our prior owner and developer of that subdivision. We're asking that a local attorney who is working with the city to work with a prior officer of that company to sign a quitclaim deed to the city.
Oh, okay, all right. So we, in fact, do not own these properties already?
It's the opinion of the city attorney that we do not own the properties, that they have been, because they're labeled as park, that the appraisal district put them in the name of the city when in fact we've never had any park improvements on the property. We're just trying to clean up title to it and allow the city to possibly dispose of the properties.
Thank you, Cindy. That
ma'am.
answers my question.
Do I have further questions for Cindy from council? Then do I have a motion to accept item C?
Mayor, I make the motion to accept item C on the consent agenda.
A second?
Second.
All in favor of approving item C of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
With no nays, the motion passes 7-0. We will now move into the regular agenda. Item A is discussion of possible options for the curbside recycling program and any possible amendments. Joe Spano, are you going to present, or is Shane Kelton? Okay. I want to remind council that there is a contract with Republic Services with the city, so some of the questions you might ask, the attorney will tell you you cannot ask them. So just know it's all right to ask. It doesn't mean that we can get into the details, okay? All right. Go ahead.
Very good. Well, good morning. My name is Davey Daniel. I'm the general manager of Republic Services. Got into town in June, and Angelo State alumni, so I'm back home. Didn't imagine the first time I addressed council would be to talk about recycling, but unfortunately the state of recycling has changed, and we need to address some of those issues. So kind of to walk backwards to go forward, the program started in 2015 and had a goal of diverting about 500 tons from the residential recycle program. And then in February of 2016, there was a 50-cent charge implemented because the tonnage was less than 500 tons. So currently we're averaging about 360 tons a month with 25 to 30% contamination. So right now the average home generates about 182 pounds of trash and about 24 pounds of recycling per month. So we're diverting just over 10% of the recycling. So the reason we're here today is because literally the world of recycling has changed. In 2017, China announced that they were going to implement new tariffs and new changes to the recycling. They used to import 40% of the world's recycling. Okay, today they're down to about 10% and no longer take mixed paper. So the other piece of it is contamination. So when the recyclers would sort and mix and sort and bale all the recycled material, China allowed a 3 to 5% contamination rate. Well, in 2018, they implemented a 0.5% contamination. So if you imagine a 1,000-pound bale used to have 50 pounds of contamination in it. Now it has to have less than 5 to be marketable. Literally the world of recycling has changed. Mixed paper went from about $97 a ton for marketed material to now less than 5. And China takes 0 mixed paper anymore. The other thing, and I brought my water bottle, which does not stand straight. It used to, about 5 years ago, take 48,000 water bottles to make a bale of plastic. Now it takes 92,000 water bottles to make that same, and it has to be a cleaner material going overseas. So now we have to collect more material to get the same weight with less contamination to make the same bale of material. So we've just kind of, in 2018, literally the country, and if you've read all the newspaper articles from just about everywhere in the country, the world of recycling has changed. It's not just a San Angelo issue. It literally is a country and a world issue. So what we are asking is to really negotiate with you guys, because we're in a spot where we've got to change something, right? So there's several options that we can do to partner with you guys the way we have for many years, and really are looking to negotiate with you all and find what option is best for the city, and feel like if we work with staff and with council pretty quickly, we can go through 1 or 2 options that really kind of fit the direction of what y'all want us to accomplish, and come up with a new world of recycling. So that's what we have for you today, and we'll entertain any questions you may have.
Number one thing I want to say is that without a doubt, I would ask that council support me in having a series of town hall meetings with the citizens so we better understand their perspective on recyclables and what they might think would be an option for them or no options from them. I don't believe council today should direct us in any direction, because it's all about the citizens, and there was so much controversy in the past over this contract. So we need citizens' input. We'll be having town hall meetings. With that said, we can entertain questions, but no decision, of course, or direction will be given today. Thank you. Harry, would you please?
Well, I guess I'd ask a couple questions. As we look at recycling today, curbside recycling, there are more citizens doing that, but we're still not 100%. We're probably 40 to 50% of the citizens. Now, 5 years ago, before we started curbside recycling, that was probably 10 to 15%. If we're not going to have curbside recycling, what will ultimately happen is we're going back to 10 or 15% of the people that will recycle, regardless of how we make this happen. So that means that there's going to be more tonnage in the landfill. That also means that there'll be a difference in the way that trash is picked up, simply because in my household, I have 2 recycling cans and 1 trash can. Okay, I know that we are probably not going to hold that stuff and transport it someplace within the community. I just know that that's not going to happen. So now, one of the things we're going to have to be looking at is I got twice as much trash as I've had before, or maybe even more than that, because I was recycling probably more than 50% of my stuff. So I think as we go forward, one of the things we need to be cognizant of is okay, now if we're not going to have curbside recycling, there's going to be more opportunity for residents to be throwing everything in the trash. That means we need to be really looking at, are we only going to pick up trash once a week? Or are we going to have more cans? What do we need to do as we go forward with this? So those are things that I know that citizens are going to be interested in. The other thing that they're going to be interested in, how can we do this without any more cost to us? So we've got to figure that out. I have to agree with the mayor. We're going to have to get some input from citizens. I already have heard from a number of citizens on this particular issue. And so I pass that kind of stuff along to Republic and to the city as we move forward.
May I ask Shane to come forward for just a minute? Because certainly with the conversation that we're having now, it has some impact on the landfill. So does this change the amount of trash that we're going to have at the landfill and force us into addressing landfill issues sooner than later?
Depending on which options or what we want to look at moving forward and how we want to move forward, if we're still diverting or if we're just do completely away with curbside recycling, we go completely back to trash. Yes, we'll see an increase of 330, 360 tons per month. We'll go back into our landfill. That will hasten the lifespan of what we have left in our landfill, but not drastically. Instead of looking at a 15-year, it might back down to a 12 or 13-year lifespan at that point, depending on the stream.
Okay. May I ask what other towns in West Texas are doing as it relates to this China issue?
As far as I know, San Angelo is the only West Texas town that has a curbside recycle program. So across the state, many people have changed. They can change the stream. They can pass along a cost increase to their constituents. There's not one answer for that because every one of the cities have picked a different option, right? So you could be partial. Take mixed paper out, and then the cost increase may change a little bit. So they may take some of the options and combine them to create their own that was best for their citizens.
Relative to the amount of trash that we pick up, statistically, how much do we pick up per person in the city of San Angelo compared to other cities?
That's actually a great question. So right now, the city of San Angelo has an every other week recycle program, and we average about 12 pounds per pickup. So that's about 24 pounds a month. In towns that I was in the Houston area, we did 12 to 18 pounds per week. So the amount, and then the contamination was probably in the 20 to 15% instead of the 25 to 30. So they had less contamination and recycled more goods. So relative, I would say half to the ones that have had a program active for several years.
Do I have further? Billy, would you like to ask a question, please, or comment?
On your second bullet there where it says temporarily suspend the marketing of material, what is the impact of that?
Temporarily
on San Angelo citizens.
Yep. Temporarily, that would mean that the recycling would temporarily go into the landfill until the state and the world of recycling kind of normalizes. China is continuing to threaten and implement different tariffs on recycling, so nobody that I know of really knows what the end state of recycling looks like going into 19, 20, and 21. It could come back to a more favorable market, but they're not predicting that to happen, and so, we could ride out the wave until it becomes a trend and normalizes, and then make a decision. But that's kind of what that means, is it would temporarily go, and then we could readdress it in a 3, 6, 9, 12-month period.
So, the bullets 3 and 4 are really similar? Okay, so, I mean, you couldn't probably have one without the other, right? Okay, thank you.
Lane, you have a question, a comment?
Two questions. One of them might be the first question Teresa says you can't answer. With the contract that we have through recycling with Butts, how is that going to affect them, or are they going to try to request that increased cost? Is that line item, number one? Second question is, defined mixed paper, is that paper with cardboard materials also, or is cardboard separate?
Cardboard's its own stream, and what you're holding is considered white paper. So mixed paper is newspaper, all your print ads that you get in the mailbox and things like that. Typically, it makes up about 20 to 25% of the recycle stream.
That's what's...
So to answer your other questions, Butts is being a great partner with us, working with us every way possible. They will continue to take the commercial cardboard that we pick up around the city, and are entertaining any of the options that we have going forward. But the current state of single stream residential recycling can't be bared by them.
I know that
long
50-cent increase was because at first we were not meeting our tonnage,
That's right.
which was set up in the contract
To kind of put it back into perspective, the cost of recycling has increased since January 487%. So it's more than just the sorting out problem. It's also the marketing of the material problem.
since January.
So you could conceive that when we recycle, the recyclables will become cardboard only?
Absolutely. You could absolutely be one of the options.
Certainly, it would be something that we would no longer even consider a conversation about 50 cents per customer for not meeting goals. Just so we're talking the same language. Tommy?
Dave, talk to us a little bit. If this council said we're just going to stay with the current contract, we executed a contract in good faith, and we just want to stay with that contract. Talk to us about that.
We would come back to council with what the actual cost of the increase of the change in the market would be.
So
it would be a cost increase to the city.
So, okay, if we just say we're going to stay with the current contract, we're not going to do anything. I assume that's an option we have. So,
just a moment, please. Daniel, would you like to make a comment?
Tommy, and we are getting as far as the contract discussions, negotiations, what could happen if one party doesn't want to
agrees not to agree.
Correct. So that would be something that, quite frankly, would require our city attorney's input. So at this point, we're not ready to discuss this.
Okay, all right.
Lucy, please.
I was wanting to ask, when is what the time span are we talking about? Like, when is this supposed to take place? How soon?
And from our perspective, the sooner the better. We're addressing council now because our contract with Butts has expired, and the options we have to continue at the current state are no longer there. So whatever council decides, we would ask that we go as quickly as possible, knowing that means different things, right? So as quick as possible is the answer. Yeah.
So I think the number one thing is we want to make sure that we get some town hall meetings set up in various parts of the city. Each council member might work with the city to get your areas in a town hall meeting so we can quickly get citizens' input to decide which direction. Yes, Tom?
And this may be towards Teresa or somebody, Mr. Daniel, let me see. Before we go before we go further into this, it's kind of hard to go there with saying what are the cost options here. Is this $1 million problem? Is it a $2 million problem? Is it a 500? Can we ask that, or?
Oh, yeah, you can ask him anything. I'm just not going to answer your question.
Well, you just did. All right, so I got you on one. Anyway, so, David, I mean, is this a $2 million problem? Is it a $1 million problem? I mean, as we go to these town hall meetings, somebody's going to say, okay, so let's say, and we'll have people for and against it. I mean, we're all going to have to sit down and get feedback, and this will be a hard decision coming forward. But we can't go in there without maybe a broad spectrum idea of, this is $1 million problem for the city. Is it $1.5 million? Is it a 500,000? I know just by looking, if you can't get rid of that stuff, you're going to have to haul that somewhere else. So that involves trucks and freight and fuel.
Yeah, and I think that's the difficult part to answer is depending on what we choose to do, right? So there's so many options within these options that we could shake this thing up in many different ways. But just as is, if nothing changed, you're somewhere between a $700,000 and $1 million problem.
Okay.
So the reality is if the citizens say, we don't want curbside recyclables, so everything goes into our landfill, that would seem to me then there's no additional cost to you. Or in fact, reduced costs.
Feasibly, yes.
Because if you're not doing 2 trucks per household every week, your
Yes,
costs
but I would
come
have
down.
to add more to the trash to be able to pick up more tonnage. But
Yeah, but you still.
it's not a one-for-one, is
Yeah,
your
but
answer.
you have 2 trash cans today. We're not going to reduce the number of trash cans. They might both be brown versus brown and green, but we're not changing the number of trash cans. So whoever's trash is X amount of pounds, my trash pounds don't change. Because I'm using a green and a brown.
Right.
Regardless if
Total,
they're 2
you're
browns
right.
or 2 greens, my trash load doesn't change.
Total
So the
waste
amount of
does not
trash
change.
in the city of San Angelo in pounds will not change.
Correct.
The only thing that changes is the cost of recycling. And if, in fact, you reduce the amount of recycling curbside pickups, your costs go down.
Yes.
So we just need to say that, so people can start to decide what their options are. Tom, you have further question? Tommy, comment? Do I have any further questions or comments from council? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right, so we're going to start getting the town hall meeting set up and see where we go with the trash. We will move into item B, second reading and public hearing on an ordinance for case Z18-13, a rezoning from the general commercial, heavy commercial, CG, CH, and single-family residential, RS1, zoning districts to the heavy commercial, CH, zoning district, or alternatively to the planned development, PD 18-04 zoning district, being 2.053 acres located at 3014 Grape Creek Road. John?
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. We've got these in the opposite order, so let me skip to that case. This is the item that you saw last time, the Hirschfeld property, Grape Creek Road and West 31st, and so your recommendation at that time was a planned development instead of the straight rezoning to heavy commercial as they had requested. So some of this I'm going to skip through quickly because it's what you saw last time, but just as a reminder, this is an area that the long-range comprehensive plan shows for industrial development. However, it's split with commercial zoning on this side of the line and residential zoning on that side. And you recall that the property owner adjacent to the residentially zoned portion had concerns about some of the things that were happening on that adjacent property. Again, some pictures if we need to go back to, but here's the home and then here's the Hirschfeld property next door. So what we came back with was a plan development. Your recommendation was to include no buildings, structures, or storage within that 55 feet of that east property line. You can see that here on the map. So not exactly the same as where the zoning boundary is today, but basically 55 feet from that eastern property line. Based on the discussion, we added a couple of other provisions that we wanted to put out there for your consideration. It wasn't part of the motion, so these items are additional, but again, we wanted to bring them out for your consideration. One was no vehicular access from 31st Street. There currently is no curb cuts or vehicular access from that street. So one thing you might consider, given that this is all residential back here, is continuing that by prohibiting access from 31st. Something similar that we've done in other planned developments like this that are adjacent to residential is limiting the hours of activity. This would coincide with our, we have a current noise ordinance that limits noise activities already between those hours. And so we would suggest for your consideration a limitation on activity on that site within those timeframes after 10:30 or before 7 a.m. And then as well, a limitation on lighting. We already require in certain areas lighting be shielded so that if they're lighting up the property, it can't shine over into the residential areas. This would apply that type of provision within that 55 feet so that, for example, they couldn't put big light poles along that boundary to light up their yard that would spill over light into the residential area. So again, that's a summary of the plan development that's in your packet. We'd definitely like feedback on those items. Again, that just a reminder, that wasn't part of your motion last time, but we wanted to put those ideas out. Just as a reminder, staff does recommend approval, as did the Planning Commission recommended approval of the straight commercial, heavy commercial zoning, but staff is recommending approval of the plan development that we've included in your packet. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Have you met with the homeowner and the business owner and discussed these items and got their support?
We have not, actually.
Would we normally do that?
Well, in the normal process where we go through our process, we would meet with them during the process, but typically from first reading to second reading, if it's possible to do that, we do, but given the short turnaround getting these items into your packet for second reading, there really just wasn't time to have those meetings in the few days by the time we had to get this in. I'm guessing that those folks may be here today unless they were completely comfortable with your recommendation last time.
So it was 2 weeks ago that we discussed this?
Mm-hmm.
So in 2 weeks, we haven't had conversation with them, okay. So is a property owner, business owner in the audience? Do I have questions from council?
Is there anybody
Tom?
from Hirschfield here?
I asked if anyone was in the audience from the business or the residential area, and doesn't seem like there is. Do you have a question, Tom?
Do you think this solves the problem? If he claims lightning hits his house because of the adjacent part of that, of which it has happened a couple times since they moved the metal, and they aren't storing anything in that. It's hit there a couple times. Now he claims it's not as severe. But as Billy pointed out, his carport and the pictures are still made out of steel and pipe.
Can we go back to that picture that shows how close the fence is to the residential structure? Question is, did he get hit last night or the night before?
I think I don't know that I can completely answer that question. I don't know that it solves all of the problems that he raised. It solves the concerns that I think we have the ability through an ordinance like this to address by keeping materials away from those residential properties. But it may not solve all of the issues that he raised.
So would we be talking about the northeast corner of that, or are we just talking the entire east side? And what I'm worried about is, what if a point in time they wanted to sell this, or somebody else buys it, or there's a transition of ownership here. You've got a piece of property that has something to it that might, hinder it happening either way, and it's not down a property line. So it's not really a footprint on a footprint on a footprint for what we've got. So now we've got two things we have to juggle.
I guess I'd have a couple answers to that. First of all, the simple answer is that we drew the 55 feet from the whole side property line. This would allow them to do more on the property than they are today, because today this whole yellow area is residentially zoned. So they basically can't do anything industrial or commercial on the property. This PD limits them pretty severely, though. They can't store anything, build anything. They could potentially park vehicles or some other industrial.
Describe what they
related.
can do. Because we're talking about what they can't do. What can they do?
Only thing I can think of is park vehicles.
It's a parking lot. It would be my suggestion to not rush this. I mean, I think we need to talk to both these people. If that didn't harm anybody else here, I think we need to talk to Hirschfield. We need to talk to Banner and see if this solves the problem. I would hate to make a motion today and it not do it. And I don't think this will be hard to do. I mean, I can tee that up with John, and he and I can have a phone call with the Hirschfield people, and Banner, same thing. I just hate to go forward with this right now, and we still aren't for sure if either side's comfortable.
Do I have other questions or comments from council? Then what I would ask, do you want to make a motion do I need a motion to postpone this to a future meeting?
Yes, and our request would be that you just pick a date certain, whether it's the next meeting or 2 meetings from now.
I think it should be in the next meeting, only because we've already had a property owner concerned, so I think the sooner the better. And so I would ask that at the next city council meeting, which would be September the 18th, that we be ready to vote on this item.
And I think,
Make a motion.
I think consensus is fine, as long as you
Okay.
are all good with that.
Any opposed to September 18th meeting? All right. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
We'll move on to item C, which is consider an appeal from a denial by the Design and Historic Review Commission, DHRC, regarding exterior improvements to a building located at 220B North Chadbourne Street. John?
Thank you. As you mentioned, this is an appeal of an amendment to a previous river corridor approval. And I'll talk a little bit first before I get into the specifics of the case about what exactly that means. As you know, we've talked about at a previous meeting amending the boundaries of the river corridor, but we currently have what's called the River Corridor District, which encompasses areas along the river as well as a large area of downtown, in which development standards that are higher standards, as well as a different review process for development in those areas, those would apply. Some of the purposes from the River Corridor Master Plan that created this include protecting the public investment in these areas, the importance of downtown in particular, but also the river corridor. The city's invested a lot of money in making the river what it is today, and wanting to protect that by being aware of and approving what goes next to the river or in close proximity to the river, as well as downtown. Similarly, protecting property values and helping to promote tourism by ensuring that there's high-quality development in these areas. So there are some general criteria in the River Corridor Master Development Plan, which is what the downtown or the Design and Historic Review Commission looks at as they review proposed development activity in these areas. And as it says there, the purpose is to strike a balance between providing flexibility in building design, yet promoting and ensuring a consistent design quality. That's one of the issues that commission struggles with, is wanting to encourage high-quality development in the area and let building owners and property owners and business owners do what they think is necessary for their business, but also ensuring that that is high quality, and particularly in the downtown area where buildings are literally touching each other. What one business does can positively or negatively affect the business right next door. And so again, the idea is to balance both the needs, in this context, the historic needs of a property with the use demands of contemporary buildings. So some of the specific criteria that they look at in context with this particular request, it talks about colors, discouraging bright colors, discouraging lots of whites and cool grays, not having a lot of reflective glass. In a downtown, you like that, what designers call permeability. You like to be able to see in the businesses, and so you don't want, where there's glass, you don't want mirrored glass, for example, is known to be not good for business activity. But it talks about things like natural earth colors, and so those are some of the things that the commission looks at. It encourages things like stone, brick, concrete, precast stone in terms of architectural materials, and so that played into the DHRC's recommendation as well. So here's what was originally approved back in June of 2017. This did get TIERS funding as well to help remodel the exterior of this building. So there's a stucco finish, so that's not the original finish on the building, which was originally brick or stone, but it had a stucco finish applied over the outside. So the original approval was to take that, add a door and 2 windows on either side, as you can see here, also placing a canopy out over the sidewalk, as well as some lights and landscape planters. And so that was approved as requested by the property owner. Went to the Design and Historic Review Commission. They approved it as requested. However, what the property owner went out and did was actually something different. And so once staff was made aware that what was installed on the building did not meet what was approved, we contacted the property owner, and she applied for an amendment to that original approval, basically to approve what she had done instead of what was approved. So what that did was add a couple of additional windows. Instead of 2, it's now 4, slightly different color on the top. And then the real issue is the white tile here. That is what the main thing that the commission had a concern with, this white hexagonal tiling. And I'll talk in a second about what their specific concerns were with that. Again, this is the comparison with what was approved versus what color was used. And so the rationale that the commission gave in denying this, number one was the lack of information. The applicant did not attend either meeting where this was discussed of the commission, and so they didn't get the answers that they felt they needed, particularly on the white tile. There was some concern that appeared to be a bathroom type tile that wasn't an exterior tile, number one. Number two, that it wasn't the style and shape of tiles that would have been used on a building of this era. And so the commission specifically mentioned they didn't have a problem with tile if it was a type of tile that would have been used on this building that was built in this time period. But that hexagonal tile is really a different type of tile that is not typical on an exterior of a building. Also, the white is kind of a stark contrast to all of the more muted colors of both the adjacent buildings as well as this particular building. I should add that for the most part, the commission didn't have a big problem with the lights, the color, the windows. It was really the tile that was at issue, but for procedural reasons, they denied the whole thing. One of the things they discussed was approving everything but the tile, and I think that, if I could speak for them, their recommendation to you all would be to approve everything except the tile. But again, for procedural reasons, their vote was to deny the request up or down on the whole thing. So the options that you have before you, you could approve as requested. You could approve, but making any changes that you see fit. For example, the tiling, either approving a different tiling, or I think what the commission had recommended was going back to what was originally approved and just having them do what they initially requested and said they were going to do. Or you could just simply deny the whole thing, and the building would have to be returned to what it was before. Staff does recommend approval with whatever changes you all recommend. And as mentioned, the commission, Design and Historic Review Commission, did recommend denial unanimously. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Would you go back and put the picture of the original building up, please? So it was a solid wall?
Yes.
No rock, no brick?
That's correct.
Is it a historically listed registered building?
It is not, and that's actually something I meant to mention, is that there are two different types of review in the river corridor. If it has a historic designation, then the bar is set higher. It has to meet historic design standards to a much higher degree. If it's not historically designated, then it just needs to meet what we call the river corridor guidelines, which historic character can be taken into account, but it's not the high bar in terms of completely matching or being consistent with historic design standards for a building. And so it's a lower bar, but again, historic context of both the existing building and surrounding buildings can be taken into account.
I think my first concern is we have a system. There are two commissions. We have a Tiers Board and we have a Downtown Historic Review Committee. And if we approve things with those two commissions, there's a reason for it, and there's assumption that what is presented would be executed. The execution should be in line with what was proposed for the approval originally given by both boards. So, Harry, would you like to make comments?
Please. This is downtown, so it's in my district. And I have to agree with what the mayor has to say, and that is, quite honestly, they brought a plan before the DHRC, and they didn't do that plan. They didn't adopt that plan. They did something different. So the bottom line is from my perspective, is if we go through these particular agencies, these commissions, boards and commissions, we ought to be doing what we say we're going to be doing. So quite honestly, bringing this before council to me today, even though that's their privilege to do that, I have to stay with the DHRC on this. You know, first of all, we really need to make sure that we're being consistent downtown, and that's what those two commissions are doing, those boards are doing. So from my perspective, we've really got to support what they're doing, especially when they are doing it by the book.
Do I have, Lane, would you like to make a comment?
I think consistency is the number one issue here. So another question I have is, if we deny this appeal, will it go back to the DHRC and they can approve everything at that level, or will it come back to us after that?
No, I believe you're the final appeal on this. You could, I'm guessing, Teresa, they could remand it back to the DHRC for a final decision?
They could, yes.
But again, I think, speaking for the DHRC, again, even though they denied the whole thing, their recommendation to you all is to approve everything except the white tile, and that something else be done, either the original or something different. Now, so I suppose what you could do is approve everything but the white tile and send that decision back to the DHRC for a decision on something different.
The DHRC has already approved the tile for this building, so if we deny this, then there's already standards met. They would have to go back and do one of those standards.
Correct. They essentially would have to go back, and for the area where the white tile is, they would have to go back and do it like their original request was.
Gotcha.
As well as the windows?
Well, that's up to you. Again, the DHRC was okay with the change to the windows. But
why is that? It wasn't approved. So I'm just questioning.
Well, I think what we encouraged them to do was not to penalize someone for doing something different, but to look at it fresh, as if somebody came in with this proposal today, would you approve it or not approve it? And so thinking of it like that, they were okay with the changed colors, the changed windows, and so they didn't want to punish them for doing it differently if they would have approved those differences in the first place.
Lucy, do you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to ask you, was she told this from the very beginning, what the restrictions would be? As far as this is what you got to have, this is the color?
Yes, well, again, we didn't tell her she had to do those colors.
No,
she came in and said, here's what I want to do, and everybody said, yeah, that looks great, go ahead and do it.
Because that color is in the Design and Historic Review book. I mean, that shade of green that was presented is within the historic guideline color palette.
So nobody thought to actually tell her, you have to do what you came and got approval to do. I mean, that's kind of a given.
There's a series of colors that they recommend selecting from. Yeah. So the question, I think this isn't a question, sorry, it's a comment. My concern is setting precedent. And that really becomes the biggest issue in terms of if we approve the changes that were not part of the original plan, then we basically are approving anybody who wants to do what they want to do with their building, even if it isn't the original plan, it's okay.
Well, I was kind of wondering if we deny it, they go ahead and go back to DHRC, and if for the windows they could work it out or not, and at that point they can say change it or not change it if they see fit, the board, that those extra windows are there. But besides, the precedence is already set to where that board has been okaying projects throughout the history of it, and we don't want to set that precedence of someone else and going against them.
On the tiers funding, what did the tiers board fund? Because they usually
three
pick
doors in there.
specific, name the specific things tiers board approved for funding.
Well, they approved those exterior improvements to the building. Now, at the
presented at the DHRC.
Yes, now at the time, the Tiers Board, their approvals were a little more open-ended, and so they didn't get as much into the design details, partly because they defer to the DHRC. Yes. And so they're really just looking at the funding amounts and the type of improvements. So it's not necessarily accurate to say that they approved this design.
Because it was approved by another board.
Correct.
And what about the canopy? Because that was part of the original design.
Well, and that's something that we've struggled with determining whether or not, if an applicant brings forward a whole package, do we consider that as a package and they have to do it all or none? Or can they do parts of it and either not do parts of it or wait to do those later? What our current application of the rules is that they have approval to do that canopy, but they're under no obligation to do it. If they do a canopy, it has to meet those standards. Now, either you or the DHRC, in most cases, could make that a condition of the approval, but in this case they didn't. They could say, well, we only like the windows if you have a canopy over it, and they could make those, they could tie those together. But again, in this case, they did not do that.
Any further questions? Billy?
I just have a couple of comments because I agree with what I heard, that we should stand pretty firm on our position on holding them accountable to the rule, my thought. That if something was approved and they changed all of that, then I don't think this council should second guess, as Harry said, the Historic Design Review Committee. But at the same time, I have to tell you, in driving by that building, those windows and that color is has much more curb appeal than the lighter color and those other windows and doors that looked more opaque. So I think this is what Lane was suggesting, is that, you know, if we uphold the denial here and then this property owner decides to go back to the Historic Design Review Committee and, you know, to seek approval on this, I think, you know, maybe that's what I would like to see done. The other comment I'd make, when I was reading the application, it did say any changes to the design made after this approval may require a second approval, and apparently the applicant didn't go back, you know, once they changed what they were going to do. So they had an application that they signed that said that if they changed the design, that they would go back before, you know, the Historic Review Committee, and they did not do that. So, you know, I think we should, you know, move on this and let them then go back and, you know, seek approval for whatever they don't want to change.
Well, and let me clarify that while she didn't apply to get those changes approved before she did them, she since applied, and that's the appeal you're hearing today, is She did go back to the DHRC and say, are you okay with these differences? And they said no. And so I guess I want to be careful.
Make sure we know what we're saying.
I don't think
Right, but she should have gone back. I'm sorry to interrupt you, John.
sure.
She should have gone back, in my opinion, before she did this, you know, to seek that approval, because that's what she, the way I see it, that's what she agreed to in the application that she filled out, that she would go back if she was making some changes to what had been approved. So I don't know. That's just the rule, and I like to see the rules followed if we have something in writing that somebody's signing.
Well, it's hard because if you prove it here and then you don't do somebody else's, we're not being consistent, and you set a precedent. So I think we want to make sure that if we have these commissions and there's rules and regulations for them, that we follow as said. So, Tom, go ahead.
John, has she said why she did this?
Well, as I mentioned, she didn't come to either of those commission meetings. So, and this item isn't listed as a public hearing, and I actually don't know if she's here or not, but you might open it up for comment if she is here to make her case. I think that would be fair.
Is Michelle here? No.
Okay, so I'm with y'all. I mean, she went off the reservation here and brought something in and went a path that wasn't approved, and she knew that, all right? Now we have to look at it and say, okay, if we make a move on this, does she just walk away from it and leave it as is? I mean, does she literally, can she walk away from it and say, I'm just not going to mess with it?
That would be considered a violation that we could issue citations, or we could keep on the property owner, and technically, even if the property sells, that obligation would go with that property. So that's not an easy task, but we could keep following up and even take it to municipal court to try to get it returned back to.
I have one last question, and this will go to Rick. Have you looked at this?
You know, I agree with everything John said. I will say that if we send it back to the Design and Historic Review Commission, based on what John has told us their recommendation is, I believe today if you move forward with approving this less the tile and saying as long as she returns it to the original plan of what she presented, I mean, if you want to, you know, go back to that I think the DHRC is what they're recommending. They're okay with the color of the awning and the
There's no awning.
I'm sorry, the color scheme and the additional window, but the tile has got to change. And originally, what was proposed where the tile is? What was in the original?
I believe it was the same, just the same stucco walls, just painted a different color.
Well, it changes the whole look of the building when you add that much glass to it.
And it
It's
does.
a historic district. Harry, you had a question or comment?
Just a real quick comment. I have to agree with what Billy said. It looks a lot better than some of the surrounding buildings, but we have to be consistent. We have to make sure that these property owners follow what they tell us that they're going to do when they go before these boards and commissions. So quite honestly, I think in this particular case, regardless of how hard it is on the property owner, which she didn't come to the DHRC meeting, and evidently she's not here at this particular meeting. I think we have to go back and support what DHRC is and just uphold this denial.
The other issue is you see the color as it is. What you don't have is what the color would have looked like if it would have been executed. So you only see what you see. And so, okay, do I have a motion, Harry? Oh, wait, go ahead, Harry.
And let me remind you again that a full-out denial is not what I think the commission would have recommended. Again, they were okay with the other changes, and it was only the tile. So,
again, what did they originally prove?
right. And if that's your intent, then the motion would be just a flat-out denial. That's correct.
I think the motion needs to be that we uphold a denial on this all the way through, and I think what that does is it kind of tells the rest of the downtown property owners that there's a proper procedure to go through, and if they need to make changes, then they need to come back before the commission and do that. So from my perspective, my motion is really just to uphold the denial.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor of Harry's motion, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Item D, consider ratifying a resolution by COSA DC authorizing the use of sales and use tax funds in an amount not to exceed $121,000 to provide master planning services for a business and industrial park located at the City of San Angelo Airport, Mathis Field, with participation by the City of San Angelo for projected authorized under Chapter 505 of the Local Government Code for Type B development corporations. Guy, you're on.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council, Mr. Valenzuela, Guy Andrews, Director of Economic Development. As you will recall, one of our goals in economic development is to improve our infrastructure, and especially at the airport. This particular plan covers what is outside of the facilities of the airport. There's also a grant that's been approved for actually the airport facilities themselves inside the fence and that sort of thing. So what the area that we're talking about in this particular proposal is basically this area that's in green and blue outside of the fence of the area. This will be made available with the closing of a north-south runway. This used to be part of the no-fly area for safety in that. So with closing that facility or that particular runway, it will make this particular facility available for commercial development of the airport. We'll figure that out, how to, there we go. In this RFQ, Centurion Planning Design selected for master planning services under city request for quotes on this. This is outside of the FAA proposed AIP 2018 grant for the facilities within the airport. It's non-aviation related elements not eligible for FAA funding. Master plan proposal task would include a real estate portfolio review and analysis, including the community context and stakeholder engagement, a market assessment of relevant commercial uses and aviation-related benchmarking, asset positioning, conceptual land use diagram and presentation of findings. And then there's also an element of on airport water, wastewater treatment plant evaluations. There is a wastewater facility that is not in use on the airport at this time. That would be an included evaluation of whether that facility might be used, because sewer is an issue in this plan. Total fees for this, and this does come as a recommendation from the COSA DC Board of Directors for ratification, would be a total fee of $120,991.
I was thinking that we had discussed that this master plan was not only what was inside the fence, but what the property the city owns outside the fence. And so I have a question about that, because that's not what that reflected. Michael, do you have a comment on that?
No, go ahead. I think this is the piece outside the fence that the FAA won't fund. And so this is alternate funding for possible development outside the fence, which could be available for non-aeronautical uses. That's the key, is that non-aeronautical availability kicks it out of the FAA funding bucket.
Okay, so but the red mark around that area, that would be all within the fence line, right? Is that within the fence line?
No, ma'am, that's outside of the fence line of the
covers
airport.
both. And
so it's the entrance, primarily the entrance, that vacant property as you enter the airport.
And it includes the parking area and the rental car area? think that would be yes.
It does.
Yes.
It does cover parking and rental.
Mayor,
Yes.
Mitch has already suggested to me an idea to improve that situation.
Correct.
That we think we can implement well in advance of the completion of this.
That's what I thought. So
That's what we're hoping for.
Okay,
It was a
good.
very good idea, and
may I throw something else out that perhaps could be a good idea? I noticed that at the Museum of Fine Arts, they have a wonderful covered parking that is taken care of by solar panels. And I just wonder, because we don't have any covered parking at the airport, if there would be an opportunity to work with a solar company to come up with some solar covered parking, because as you know, in July, it gets pretty hot out there if your car's parked out there and it's not covered. So just thinking, we want to suggest some ideas like that perhaps?
Yes, ma'am, and since this is the planning stage of it and the design and planning, those types of items can be considered. We'll certainly ask them to consider those items as well.
Do I have questions from council? Harry, do you have a question?
Comment. Guy, would you go back to that last, come back right there. I want to make sure that we really emphasize the airport water and wastewater stuff, because really in that part of the community, unless we have those two things, we're never going to develop that out there. So this is a very, very big part of that whole development, is to make sure that we know how we're going to get water, how we're going to dispose of water, all of those types of things. So hopefully this master plan will then detail that for us.
Yes, sir, and it's actually the overall water and sewer for that area is being studied and that sort of thing. This
It's
is
a
an
duplicate,
addition-
really, because we already have passed the study that Allison is responsible for. Allison, you might want to come up, dear, as well as now this master plan. So hopefully they would overlap and support the same game plan on it.
That's
And
correct.
so Allison, come up. But Billy, did you want to go ahead and ask a question while Allison's coming up?
Well, my question was on that item number 4, like Harry, because I don't think much is feasible unless we're able to do that. But I noticed in the line item cost of doing this that I think it was going to cost $13,000 in that line item to evaluate the water and wastewater treatment plant and whether or not the current ones could be, brought back online. And I've heard from somebody before that it was cost prohibitive to bring those current facilities back online, that it would just cost too much. So I'm glad the mayor asked Allison to come up, because I'd like her thoughts on that. And do we want to, put $13,000 into something that we already know is going to be cost prohibitive and need to look at something else, which, my comment/question.
So we've had a discussion with COSA DC relative to this study. While they do seem to overlap, really they are more specialized in different areas. So the water and wastewater evaluations associated with this plan will be specific to that site layout, to all that undeveloped area, and be able to really, evaluate what kind of businesses are going to go there, and then what kind of impact do those have to the sewer system. The study that we have currently going on is really evaluating the existing system and a lot further downstream. So the entire area of Lake Nasworthy and all those lift stations that ultimately lead to the Bentwood area. But really the evaluations that this consultant will be doing can plug into ours and be able to enhance our study too. So I think they will work together really well, but this one is more specialized to the development, and whereas we are not looking at individual lots and what kind of businesses could go there, what kind of loading those would have on the water and sewer system. So really I think we need both of them to to be used together.
So Allison, are you saying that it is feasible that we might be able to use existing treatment plants out there and water system?
I think that it'll be evaluated with the cost of upsizing those lines that we have going across the lake and near the bridge there. It may be more economical to redo the plant than it is to upsize 4 miles of pipe
going down to where we eventually outfall into the gravity system. But those are the type of things that I think that the two plans can kind of give us the cost benefit of both of them. So both of them will be expensive either way, though.
Thank you.
But necessary.
Yes, ma'am.
Do I have further questions from council or questions? Anything? All right, with that, I would entertain a motion.
I'd move approval of ratifying the resolution brought to us by the City of San Angelo Development Corporation.
Second on it by Harry. Public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Item E, I think I'm on item E. Yeah. Item E is consider ratifying a resolution authorizing the use of sales and use tax funds in an amount not to exceed $46,435 to provide an economic development incentive to U.S. Customs and Border Protection air and marine operations with participation by the city for project authorized under the Texas Economic Development Corporation. Guy, you're on again.
This is phase 2 of incentives for the U.S. Customs and Border Protection air and marine operations. They currently lease a building at 8210 Hanger Road. 60 employees will be retained with this incentive, and up to 60 additional employees at an average salary of $120,000 per year would be added as a result of this. The incentive is for a permanent assignment of UAV operations at Mathis Field. They're being moved from Corpus Christi. This requires EDA with the City of San Angelo Airport, Economic Development Agreement with the City of San Angelo Airport. The project area is shown in the area. It's a grassy area, and what we'd be doing is studying that area. This is an engineering study and planning area, what's underneath that, what it would require to pave that particular area for the towers that are placed in that area. And these are for the drone operations. And these are what the towers look like. There are some existing ones out there at this particular time, but with the increased capacity that would be needed, there'd be additional towers that would be placed in there. The elements in the plan, there's a geotechnical investigation, engineering topographic survey, foundation design. This is an optional item, tower design if requested. Those towers are already designed, so not likely that would be requested. This brings it to 90% design submittal, which includes a geotechnical survey and the structural $15,000. 100% design submittal, $5,000. Bidding support if requested, which may not be in construction phase services, also if requested. The total for the study is $46,435.
I think it sounds like a great project from my perspective. Do I have questions or comments from City Council?
I just have one question, Guy. Where can I get an application for one of those $120,000 jobs?
Had you been raised in the new generation and your parents told you don't play with those video games, these pilots, that's where a lot of them initially got their training for this and then went on to become pilots for this. So they are highly specialized, but they are great jobs.
Sounds like a great project. I agree, Mayor.
Well, let's go get in line.
I know it.
Do I have, Harry?
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
All in, public comment, please.
Mayor, I want to
Yes.
emphasize this is just design.
Yes.
That we hope to get from this plan suitable for bidding, and there'll be more money needed for completion of these activities.
This would even further increase their operations, correct?
Just to get to the extra 60 employees.
Further consolidate.
Yeah. All right, so with no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Item F, consider ratifying a resolution by COSA DC making application to the City Council for approval of Second Amendment to the Articles of Incorporation, providing for term limits of its board members. Once again, Guy, you're on.
Currently, our Articles of Incorporation have this particular item that would be deleted, is that each director shall hold office for a term of 2 years unless sooner removed or resigned. Each director, including the initial director, shall be eligible for reappointment. A director may be removed from office by a majority vote of the City Council at any time without cause. So what we're recommending is to change that particular article in the spirit of limiting the terms. Our local government code specifies 2-year terms in this, so basically what we're saying is that each director shall hold office for a term of 2 years unless sooner removed or resigned. From and after September 4, 2018, no director shall serve more than 3 consecutive 2-year terms. For the purposes of this section, the City Council for the City of San Angelo shall have authority to make future appointments to the board for terms less than 2 years in a manner that will stagger board member terms. A director may be removed from office by a majority vote of the City Council at any time without cause. So this continues that spirit of term limitation and also in keeping with the local government code, and allows the terms to be staggered so that the board terms don't all expire at one time.
Do I have Tommy? Go ahead.
Does this essentially start all the current members' terms over as if they were brand new, so they've each got, but with staggering, so each of them have 2-year terms, maximum three terms?
There are some members that were appointed to fill unexpired terms, and so in that process, we would then make the appointments at different time in order to stagger those terms.
Brian, I think you had a comment.
Yes, on the 18th, we have the reading of Chapter 2, which will speak to some of this as well, and then we'll be coming forward to get the staggering of those terms.
Further, Harry?
I just want to remind people that when we talked about this a few council meetings before, that I said that I think this should be the standard for all boards and commissions, and I'd like to try to make sure that we go forward with that.
That is what we're bringing the first reading of on the 18th, is to kind of unify board terms and term limits, and as much as is possible. Some have some specific statutes that they have to go under, but we're trying to unify them as much as possible.
So the question a minute ago was, so effective after passing today, that means that everyone would be considered day one in their position, or 2 years or 3 years, or how do we determine, do we just start counting today?
We have several that are in unexpired terms that will need an appointment to their first. Nobody but one is in their second term. So everybody's in either their first term or unexpired except for one position. Again, when we do the first reading, I think we can talk about it more, and then we will be bringing the appointments for. Do you have some? Okay.
Well, and I'd just like to point out, this item is just for permission to modify the Articles of Incorporation. So this doesn't have any legal effect as far as what they're actually doing within their specific terms. This is just allowing you guys to move forward with those changes that we want to make.
Okay, thank you. Do I have further questions, comments? Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second. With that, is there any public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
We are going to take a 10-minute break.
Way to go, Mayor.
September the 4th. We will move on to item G, which is discussion and consideration of matters related to the fiscal year 2018-2019 operating budget, including 1, First public hearing and introduction of an ordinance of the City of San Angelo approving and adopting the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2018 and ending September 30th, 2019. This budget will raise more property taxes than last year's budget by $626,546 or 1.67%, and of that amount, $383,414 is tax revenue to be raised from new property added to the tax roll. And 2, conduct a separate record vote to ratify the property tax revenue increase reflected in the budget and place the adoption of this tax rate on the agenda for the September 18th, 2018 regular meeting of the City Council as an action item. Tina?
Good morning, Mayor, Council, Mr. Valenzuela. We have for you today for consideration the first public hearing and introduction of the budget ordinance for the fiscal year 2019 budget, as well as conducting a separate record vote to ratify the property tax revenue increase. So the proposed budget draft that we have brought for you today includes the discussion items that we had in the budget workshop, which included salary adjustments, including the police pay plan, the fire compression issues, and the performance-based raises for the general employees. It also includes an amount that we set aside for health insurance, as well as the additional 5 police officers. So first off, we wanted to let you know that I think you'll recall that Lisa Marley let us know at the last meeting that there would be some adjustment to the health insurance cost increase. And so these numbers are a better estimate of what we expect those to come in at. So that would be $119,000 if the city bears the whole cost increase. If we split it between the city and the employees, that would be a $95,000 cost to the city. And then, of course, if the employee bears the entire burden, then there would be 0 cost to the city. If you'll recall, we did have set aside an amount just over $166,000. And at that time, we had decided that we would split the cost between the city and the employee. But we are seeing the cost come in much lower, obviously. And so we wanted to give you the opportunity to discuss and give us direction for that amount.
Lisa Marley, you want to come up a minute so we could ask a question about how much money per employee the city currently spends?
Good morning, Council.
Good morning.
Morning. All right. Presently, the city pays $496 per month per employee. And in the option number 1, that rate would go to $515.17.
So on the current $496 per month per employee times 12 months, so that total number per year for the budget is how much per person? It's over something 6,100. If somebody will just do that calculation real quick for me. How much? $58.92. So currently, the city pays $5,892 per year per employee.
Correct.
So if we went for option 2, the 2.9% increase to employee, 2.9% increase, what is that dollar amount?
For the employer, it would be $511.36 per month.
No, the increase, maybe I didn't say it right, or maybe I didn't understand the answer. So right now, if we split the cost of the increase of the premium, what is the cost to the employee and what is the cost to the city of San Angelo?
The cost to the employee will vary by tier, whichever one they're enrolled in. And it varies from 60 cents at the low end per month and $31.36 at the high end. The other thing that we discussed at the last meeting, or that I was asked at the last meeting, was how many people would be affected with a net negative increase in a paycheck as a result of this increase. And I went back and looked at the numbers. Because we're going to be doing evaluations for the merit increases, we have 119 new employees that will not get merit increases, so they would see an increase or a net negative on their check. The 130 fire employees that are now not going to receive an increase, they would also see a net negative on their check. And then we have 11 new police officers that would also. So that's a total of 260 employees that would see a net negative on their paycheck.
Of potential 60 cents.
Depending on what tier they're in, yes.
What was the final amount, Lisa?
260.
But last, I want to make sure I heard what Tina said, so Tina, maybe you may want to step up. Make sure I heard what you said. We had agreed last week to roughly 166,000 and change for splitting with the employees, but now we're looking at, to cover the entire cost of the health insurance, we'd be looking at 120. So we still, looking at what we did last week, would still be in essence in the black by $47,000, $46,000. Okay.
So, as somebody that's studied numbers for a number of years, let me just make a comment here. The difference between Proposal 2 and Proposal 1 is $24,562. That is 0.033% of the entire budget. So we're really looking at a small amount. Even though it's $25,000, it's still a small amount over the entire $75 million budget, 0.033%. So it's really minuscule compared to the total $75 million.
Well, the question mark is, what does the total employee cost? Because you're talking about the increase, you're not talking about the percentage to the total budget in terms of what the total health insurance costs the city. So just to be clear.
Correct. But we're talking about these 200 and some odd employees that will end up with no increase this year because they're not getting an increase in pay, and they're going to have to pay for additional health care costs. So
I'm in favor of covering the entire cost of $119,854, since we'd already agreed last week to say we're gonna pay $166,000, $167,000. So I'm in favor of covering the entire increase.
Billy,
They don't have any.
Sorry. Did you have a question or comment, Billy?
I just wanted to confirm something that Lisa said, because either people have not, the new police officers, and, you know, they're among 260 employees that would show a negative impact on their paycheck. And then one other question, the 3136 on the high end, is that like employee and family?
What part is just the employee? Because we don't cover the cost of the family, so we just need to understand the employee aspect of it, not the entire family.
That was the range that I mentioned. We have, we have 524 employees that are in the low plan, single coverage. And under the second option, that increases the 60 cents per month.
So there's 524 employees that would get 60 cents per month increase in their health insurance? Is
That's
that what?
Correct.
Do I understand that?
Yes, that's correct. And there's, you know, we have 4 different tiers: employee only, employee plus spouse, employee plus children, and family. And then we have a low plan, a medium plan, and a high plan. So that's 12 different tiers. And so the range goes from 60 to the 3136 number.
But we're really only talking about the employee aspect of it, because we don't cover any of the costs of the spouse and or the family. So we're
Correct.
really just talking employee only. So what their total increase is for the family and the spouse doesn't concern us so much, but it impacts people.
Yes.
Just so we understand the cost that you're reflecting is employee only, not the higher tiers of coverage.
Well, in each of those tiers, the city pays for the employee only.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
I said it poorly, but
Yeah.
yes, that's my comment. Lane, did you have a comment? Lucy? Harry? You did. Tom?
You know, we've talked about this, you and I have talked about this personally. In my heart, I want to make sure that we're consistent in how we do everything. There is knowledge, and they're saying some of the wages these people make are not in the boundary of what you would expect. And healthcare helps them, but what is, needs to be realized is we pay 90-something% of their health care at the same process, and very few industries do that. So I think the city of San Angelo's done a good job of that. I mean, my heart's in, since we've already covered 166, I'm leaning with Harry and them. I'd love to cover it all at just 119 is where I see it. But I think people need to understand there's a reason some of these people enjoy working in the city of San Angelo, and their health care insurance is very nice.
A lot of companies don't do that, is what you're saying. So there are benefits. Do I have, Lucy, you?
I just wanted to make a comment also that I also agree with you, Tom, that if we can help them in any way we can, I'm for it. And like it's been stated that it was going to be $166,000. So it's a lot. I mean, it's less. So I would like to see us be able to go ahead and give them that insurance, total insurance for the employees only.
On this increase, because right now they pay $16 per month. So we're just talking about this year's increase, not what exists currently.
Right.
All right, do you need a motion, or what do we need to do here? Are we just consensus, or how do we move forward?
You could do it by consensus, or you could go ahead and make a motion that this part of it would be in the final version of the ordinance, however you prefer.
All right, so then I make a motion that for this 2018-19 budget, that we will approve the $119,854, which means there's zero increase to the employee.
Second.
All in, any public comment? With that said, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
And Mayor, if I may, while we're on this slide, I do want to point out that there will be obviously some savings there to the city. We cannot approve a budget that is not balanced, and so we cannot project revenue over expenditure by law. So what we would propose to do with that savings, that if you recall, after last week's meeting, we had about $6,800 in addition to this $46,000 for a total of $53,052. We need to discuss options on what we want to do with that savings. We could allocate it to something else. We could decrease our sales tax revenue budget. We could send it to equipment replacement. We know there's always needs there, so just need to hear what your ideas and direction is
I
with
think
that.
we need to go back and put the reduction in the sales tax, because what we did was we increased the sales tax previously to accommodate the expenditures. So my recommendation at this point in time is to take the $53,052 and put back in and reducing the sales tax forecast, which we had reduced from 3% to 1.5%. So I'm not sure what percentage that gives us, but that would be my recommendation.
So let me understand this. So instead of going to the 1.5% reduction, you're looking at doing something closer to the 3% reduction.
No, it'll be like 1.48%
Okay.
instead of 1.5%.
The original 1.5% included an additional $290,000 in that neighborhood, and so it would reduce that number by the $53,000.
With that, Billy, do you want to make a comment first?
Well, my comment is, are we just doing this one line item at a time? What if there are additional savings in other areas that we have to factor in to make sure we have a balanced budget?
We don't believe there will be any other savings from what we proposed to you at the budget workshop. And so what you'll be approving today is that proposal that included, you know, the raises, the police officers, the pay plans, and things like that.
But we can challenge any of those. So to your question, if you would like to hold off, if you would like to hold off on this, we certainly can move further into the budget discussion and come back and do this at the very end of this item on the agenda.
Could we do that? Because I thought I'd heard something that there was some reduction in other area of something we approved. So can we do that, hold off on?
This is really all we have to discuss as far as the budget is concerned. The rest of what we discuss is just telling you, you know, what the legal authorizations that are in the budget ordinance. And so this is, if you want to discuss any of that, this
We
would
can,
probably be the
because
time.
what we said last time was we made some decisions for you to put into the projected a budget, but there's certainly room to open up conversation on any of the items that we discussed last time. We were told to say, look at your budget based off of these items.
Mm-hmm.
So we can open up and have as much discussion as you want.
Well, I do have a question. And I certainly hope, because I see Chief Carter and Chief Howard at the back, I hope I'm not saying something out of line. If I am, I know they will correct me. But I had a follow-up meeting with them, and one of the things that was my understanding was the 477,000 number that we talked about last time had been reduced. Is that not true?
I would leave that to their budget analyst to come discuss with you.
Okay.
I did not have any part of that spreadsheet or the formulas, and so I'd prefer he has more knowledge of that.
Oh, okay, and maybe that's where, you know, the ball was dropped, that they didn't communicate that to you. So
I would not say,
what we're
I would not imply that the ball was dropped at all. I think maybe that just information wasn't relayed, so. There may be some slight savings due to some of the formulas in there.
Well, that was kind of a negative phrase that I used, and I apologize for that. So
okay.
I apologize. So maybe we could hear from
Chief Carter, is your budget gentleman here
Yes.
today? I thought I saw him earlier, so come forward.
Nolan Sosa, he's going to come up and help me answer your question. I appreciate it.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are y'all?
We're good.
Okay, so when we started reevaluating the pay plan, actually beginning the first steps of implementing the pay plan, we started to notice that there was a slight savings from what we had initially budgeted for the pay plan to what we realized as actuals. When we reran the numbers, the initial number proposed was 477. The number that we're seeing now is more in the neighborhood of 456. So we have a savings there of about 21,000.
Okay, so, Billy, do you have further questions concerning that?
I don't, because that's what he shared with me when I met with them last Thursday. So does that not, Tina, factor into what we were just talking about on this reduction in the health care?
It certainly could factor into the total budget as a whole, the proposed budget. I guess what we could do is once we implement the pay plan, because employees change over, the course of, as we're evaluating this. And so whatever additional savings there are there, you could direct us to just also decrease sales tax by that, whatever that amount would be.
Throughout the budget year is
We would know on October 1 what employees are in place, and as soon as we implement that new pay plan, to make sure that we cover all of those expenses, and then whatever is marginal there, we could decrease sales tax by that amount.
Well, the other thing, Billy, is those that are there October 1st might not be there December 31st. And so what you're doing is you're projecting for an annual basis what those costs would be. If you lose some at the higher end, some of those savings would be realized, and you might have got some at the lower end. So the budget, of course, is our best projection of what we think is going to happen in the year. They, of course, have said that it's $477,817, but employees come and go, as you know, and that can always have an impact on the budget.
Right, exactly, and I understand that, Mayor, but the decisions we were making on the 477, those were just projections too.
Correct.
So I'm saying if we have an opportunity to approve something that's more accurate with the information that Nolan has at this point, why wouldn't we do that rather than leave it at the 477
You're
is all I'm
correct.
saying.
No, you're correct. That's why we said we would open up the conversation, so any additional information, questions, or challenges, here's when we do it. You know, we keep talking about, you know, quote a $70-some thousand budget, but if you put in perspective, today, with the decisions that we make, you're approving somewhere around a $74 million revenue, but you're also approving almost $74 million in expenses. So if you look at that, you're going to be approving $48 million worth of revenue expenditures. So as they say, every dollar counts, and so now's our chance to ask the questions.
And if I may, Billy, we can certainly do that. We can use Nolan's more updated numbers. That's not a problem at all. We would include that in the second reading of the budget ordinance that we will bring to you on September 18th, and so you could approve it then.
Because what I see is that number probably going down rather than up, because if we have somebody on our payroll today and they leave, then we likely are going to bring somebody in at a lower salary. Not necessarily, we could bring them in at a higher salary, but if somebody retires,
you're right.
You know, making this, it's likely that that number would go down rather than up.
And the mayor put it very well when she said that it's a budget and it's a fluid document. And so we see that throughout the year in all of our departments. You know, we'll see salary savings, and so that's a good point.
Mayor, if
Yes,
I could,
Jan- Michael.
I think, Billy, you're on to, you're an experienced HR professional, so you correctly identified that pattern. But PD uses those savings through the year to pay for overtime to cover events because they are consistently in need of additional overtime dollars. So at some point, we want to draw that line in this budget development process and allow those savings, those that come from, naturally accrue from turnover, to go to fund the overtime burden that is sometimes created by the turnover.
So it's total employee expense, of which some of it is the additional 477, but some of it's the regular employee expense they have in managing the operation and or overtime. So, well, really the 477 is the increase only. What we aren't seeing is the total salary budget for the police department. This is just what we're approving today is simply the loyalty pay plan and steps. What we don't know is what's the total employee salaries on the police budget. This is just the increase.
Right.
So those dollars, in other words, these dollars we're approving today, for example, I think, now correct me when I'm wrong, is that you told us the other day we have to approve the exact dollars because you live by the dollars, not the percentages. And so we approved for consideration today $477,817 for the loyalty pay plan and steps. Those dollars are fluid, so you're saying that if they only needed the $456,000, that they have the ability to take that savings of $21,000 and put it in another line item on their budget. Is that correct?
That would be correct, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Do I have
that is a process that would require an internal budget amendment, though, and so it would go through the city manager's office for approval.
Yeah.
But we're talking about budgeting right now, though, for next year. We can't adjust that amount to the number it should be, as Nolan mentioned, and not add an additional amount to another portion of the budget at this point.
That's correct.
We want to leave the rest of the budget alone. The only thing that we're adjusting is this right here, is the salary pay plan, Mayor. So we're not actually, we're not actually moving any money around. It's just going to be this one plan.
I brought it up because we're approving dollars, a specific dollar amount for these loyalty pay plan steps. So to your point, Billy, are you asking if we need to now put into the budget proposal 2019, 2020, no, 18-19, I'm not jumping too far ahead, am I? Okay, so are you asking that we change that line item for a loyalty pay and steps to be $456,000?
Well, if that's what it is, based on the projections that Nolan and the chiefs have generated, then I think that's what we should be using. But I had another question as well.
Please.
Michael, you said the savings that they see in any area, they have the ability to move that to another area? They don't have to return their savings into the general fund?
No, I talked about the police using turnover savings that came from turnover to help pay for the overtime costs that come from events and from additional hours that have to be worked when they have turnover. That's what I talked about.
But you're saying that that would be a budget amendment that would go to, or not a budget amendment, that would be a conversation that goes to the city manager and not something that can just happen,
Exactly.
right?
Correct.
So with that, Billy, are you asking that we have a motion to reduce the loyalty pay plan and steps to $456,000 versus a $477,817?
Is that what it takes a motion to do, or
You can make the motion now, or when you pass the ordinance, you could just include that in the language of the motion to approve the ordinance. It might be a little cleaner rather than making a bunch of different motions to just
At
include.
least we deal with it and we can move on. Otherwise, we got to remember and recap everything we're talking about. So it
Trying to
almost
write
makes more
these things
sense.
down. So again, it's up to you. If you want to take the motion now, that's just to kind of clear it out of the cash, I guess, would be. It's perfectly acceptable to do it that way.
Brian will help us with a correct motion at the end. I don't think we have too many other things that council needs to make a decision on, right? So Brian will help us with the correct motion, what needs to be included. I don't think you have to figure it all out now. You just have to know what you want to do.
Okay. So we're not taking a motion, is that right, Billy? Or you want a motion?
Well, we don't have to do the motion right now. We can
don't.
do it at the end, and, Ron
Okay.
will tell us what
Just
needs
to make
be
sure we're
included.
clear.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have additional questions as it relates to any of the other items that we discussed at last budget workshop meeting? Lucy?
I was just going to ask, on y'all's, and maybe no one can tell me, or you can maybe, I just wanted to make sure that I know, is the loyalty pay the same thing as longevity? I mean, is it going to take its place? I know that longevity is the years and everything, and the loyalty is also kind of the same thing. But is it going to be the same?
I think that's a question for Ms. Marley. I'll ask her to come up and answer that one.
No, they are two different things.
They're two different things?
They are two different things. Longevity pay comes through a state statute that civil service employees receive, and the loyalty pay is an internal San Angelo plan. And I would say that in fire, they get loyalty and longevity, as well as the police department, their proposal.
So what, just to be clear then, so when we approve the $477,817, that is the loyalty pay, but people could still get on top of that longevity pay.
Absolutely, yes.
Lisa, the longevity is mandated by state statute. Is that what we heard?
Yes, and it's $4 per year, per month.
And then the loyalty pay was going to be what, $300?
It's $25 a year.
A year.
Yeah. $25 per year of service.
So in the,
Let's get that right, though.
month.
Are we talking per month, $25 per month?
Yes, it's $25 for each year of service per month that they will receive.
Correct, so it comes out to $300 at the end of the year.
$300,
per year.
yeah.
Okay.
so when we look at the budget, I think the question mark then is working, Lisa, in HR with the city manager, the longevity pay, and is already calculated into the budget numbers that have been presented in total to us. And
That is
so there
correct.
would be no additional increases to the proposed budget.
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Good question, Lucy. Lucy, you have another question?
Find it right now.
I can just slowly talk and
Don't do that.
see if I
Put more
can give
pressure
it.
on me. There was one more question I had.
Civil service?
Oh, yes. Now, does this include the civil service only? As far as this 300 and $56,000 or?
Yes,
It
yes,
does.
that is only civil service. That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we have, we can move on to another aspect of the budget proposal. Do we have any questions or additional information needed as it related to the 2% for general employees? And you want to define the general employee 2%. Again, that is a specific dollar amount, right? So you live within the dollar amount as proposed.
That's
And I'll get the sheet here in a minute. Meanwhile, you want to just, Lisa, sorry, you might just want to take a front seat here. You're the woman of the hour. Like it or not, girl, you're on.
I'm ready.
Okay, so, Lucy, you might want to talk a minute because I forgot what question I was going to ask.
Thank you. As far as the city employees go, on their, I'm telling you, I'm writing these notes and now I can't find them. I was going to ask, whenever you have a person that is working for the city, and let's say that they have this job description that says, okay, you can start at 25 and just pick a number and say they can just make, at the end, it's just 35. And let's say that they get their little raises along the way and the merit raises and everything, and they get to that at the other
Maximum.
max out. Do they not get any more raises?
What happens if an employee maxes out in their pay range, a general employee that doesn't have steps, they just, increases are awarded and then they receive the maximum of their pay range. At that point, they'll receive a lump sum check. Whatever if they were to get, in this case, a 2% on their evaluation and they're sitting at the maximum of the range, we would calculate what the 2% of their range is, and they would receive that in a lump sum check. It would not be something they would receive over the year. They'd get one check, one time.
Okay, thank you very much.
It doesn't go to the base
That's correct.
salary?
Okay, that's
Yes.
good to know.
So answer, if someone has, when we talk about the $418,104, which is basically what we're talking about, that means that if it's a meet standard, they get X. If it's above expectations, it's X. What about if you've been there less than a year? Do you qualify for a raise?
You qualify for a raise as long as you have at least 6 months. So any employee that was hired April 1st of this year would not be entitled to an evaluation and therefore no increase in salary.
You said that we had 119 new employees?
That's correct.
So are they, out of those 119, how many have been there longer than 6 months?
None of them.
None
Those
of
are
them.
all the
Okay.
ones that we've hired
So
since
they're all
April.
no. Okay.
That's correct.
Oh,
Just
I know
testing them.
I know what I was going to ask. For the police department, is that going to cap anywhere? Is there going to be a cap for that?
What do you mean a cap?
Like, say, for instance, the max, like for the years in their steps, like.
There is a maximum step for each rank, yes. Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm kind of like going, say somebody's like they're like for 35 years or 40 years, and do they still keep on getting the steps, or is there going to be a cap on there?
Well,
Lucy, we probably need you to, are you talking about sworn officers or civilians?
All right, so the way the step plan is set right now, they will move as they receive 3 years of service, they move from one step to the next. So ultimately, I guess if there was no movement, everybody would be at the top step at some point over years. You know, every 3 years they're gonna move from, like, let's say a lieutenant, there's 2 steps. If they're at the first step now, 3 years from now, whatever their date of hire is, they would move to the second step, and then that would be where they would be capped. Now, I would say, my suggestion would be if you go with something like that, ultimately, in years from now, you'll want to change those the value of the steps, because there will be no more steps for them to move to. So, you know, in future years, when you award so much for their evaluations, or 2%, whatever it is, you would put that to those step rates. That's what you would need to do.
You know,
in the
one of
future.
the items that would seem to impact our police chief as it relates to longevity, or I should say loyalty pay, I think, is that because we elect a police officer, unlike the Chief Dunn, where they're hired, they have the ability to accumulate more loyalty pay because they are a hired employee, not an elected employee. And so that can have, in a short-term, long-term, an impact on what a chief of police has the ability to make, because they can turn over every 4 years, unlike generally Chief Dunn would not be turning over.
Well, part of that is
Sand.
true, yes. The police chief also has a pay range, just like the fire chief does. Those ranges are equal. And so they are where they are in their range based on their performance or based on whatever loyalty or longevity that they receive. So, you know, we've tried to always keep the two chief positions in the same pay grade and range. But certainly when there's an election there, the salary would be negotiated at that point. So it would have to be within that pay range that we have for the police chief position.
Do I have further questions for Lisa, so I don't have to bring her back up again? My apologies, but it is good exercise. Up and down, up and down is
I like
good.
it, absolutely.
I just have one
Yes,
other
please,
question,
Billy.
Lisa. Do we have loyalty pay in other parts of the organization other than the fire department and the police department?
No, we do not.
So if somebody thinks they're getting loyalty pay, what might they be thinking of? You know, outside of a merit increase?
Dreaming.
Yeah, I would say that's a dream. I do not know what they could be talking about. There are certain departments, like in water, where we pay for certification. We also, now in the water department, they've just implemented something that I guess you might be able to call it loyalty, although it's really not that. It's because we were losing people to the oil field, we were trying to generate those salaries to be a little bit higher. But loyalty pay is not something that we offer anywhere outside of civil service.
So whatever you just mentioned that we enacted within the water department, can you just share with us a little bit about what that involves? I mean, you know, if we're trying to give employees a financial incentive to, you know, to retain them, is it real complex and I need to give you a call and schedule an appointment?
Probably.
Okay, well, and I can do that.
Well, that's fine. We have, it's different percentages for different licenses. If they hold, there's 4 different certifications that they can hold in those water positions. And so it's A, B, C, and D, and we just gave 2% per license to try to keep them here. And then there was another one that was a 5% increase and one that was a 10% increase based on different criteria that they had to have so many years in that department and certain licenses. If Lance is in the building, he might can describe
Lance
that
is
a little
coming
bit
forward
better.
as we speak.
Good, okay.
Morning, Lance Overstreet, Water Utilities Assistant Director. Morning, Council. What we actually implemented in the water department is we were seeing several of our departments that had 8 to 12 vacancies. We were having trouble getting employees, keeping employees. And so all along, the city has actually had license pay incentives for the water department that allows them to, every license they receive in terms of the state water and wastewater licenses, they get a 5% ad pay for those. What we did was we actually restructured those positions so that way once you had a couple of licenses, you could actually move into a second category of your position without changing your grade, and then it added another 2% onto that pay. And so essentially what happened is if you had 2 water licenses or a water and a sewer license had been in that department and had the background and the information necessary to work on our system, then we actually then made a position A, B, C, and D within each of those other divisions. And so it actually incentivized by basically encouraging them to get their licenses, continuing to get their licenses, but also too, they knew that if they stayed with the city and kept that skill set here in the city, that they would actually have a slight increase without changing their position.
So was it in effect implementing steps within
No, it's not a step. It's just basically
Accreditations.
It's a motivational ad pay. Yes, ma'am.
But if I understood you, say you use a job level, say job level 10, and within that job level, you have a job description for people that meet the criteria in that job level 10. So now what, if I understood what you said, is that in creating an incentive, you can get 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 certifications, right? So if someone has only 2 certifications versus 4 certifications, but they're all in job level 10, wouldn't that have added 2 steps within that job level 10?
What we actually did, and I'll just use the basic entry level person of a maintenance person. Okay. What we did is as an entry level maintenance person, you come in with your flat salary. If you go in, you get a water license and a sewer license, the beginning of each of those licenses. Essentially, each of those you'll get 5%. So your pay will increase as an ad pay. Your base salary stays the same. You increase as an ad pay up to 10%. Then if you have been with the city and worked in that department and that skill set and had that knowledge specific to the water and utility department, and you stayed there for 3 years, then you could actually then, from being just the standard mechanic or the maintenance worker, you could actually then become a senior person. And so what we did was we actually gave a small incentive to those people, because what we were finding also too is that we were hiring individuals, we were getting these licenses, we were training them and getting their CDLs and things like that, and then as soon as they got those things, they were moving on. And so what that extra 2% was is it was basically almost like a by name promotion incentive, still as a mechanic though, or still as that basic maintenance worker.
So, and here I'm going to be following the money, so I'm not sure if this is Lisa, Tina, or you, Lance. But if we're looking at making salary adjustments based on trying to retain people, where did you find the money? Was it money you already had in your budget, so you just kind of robbed Peter to pay Paul, or?
We actually, in looking at all the departments, the three divisions that this was specific to, we had, say for instance, 12 vacant positions. And what we chose to do was maybe hold back a couple of those positions in order to fund the other salaries. And so we knew that, okay, we may be 2 people short in the grand scheme of things, but having 10 people versus not having 12 people is how we chose to go about it. Okay. And so it was all within the budget and within the payroll of those specific divisions that they looked at, reducing their staff to fund those things. But there again, they were willing. It was since we've done that, 2 of those divisions have actually gone to fully staffed. And
which is a good thing.
Within just a matter of a few months. Right. And so they now have 10 people there where they were 12 short. And so, we've seen the benefit already.
So would you have had any people within, say, the group that, you started to make the adjustments that would not have gotten anything?
Actually, there were a few individuals that either time-wise at this point and or certification-wise at this point have not progressed themselves. And so we thought it was a
choice to do that.
Exactly. And we thought it was important to not just reward someone for not progressing yourself. So we saw to it that you have to show some initiative, you have to show some incentive if you want to get those increases. You can't just, get on the bus and ride without, showing some initiative. And we actually then, and we only implemented that in our 3 bottom levels of those positions. Once you actually get a promotion up into a management level, we felt that was your promotional potential and you're on a different track, and it did not go through the entire division necessarily. It was strictly on those lower income areas that we were having trouble keeping people in.
Thank you so much. You have answered all my questions. Okay. Thanks.
Any others?
That's an interesting question, Billy, that I think at some point the council may want to have a conversation about across the organization. And we're talking about incentivizing longevity for folks that really want to be here. So that may be a conversation we entertain at some point in the future.
Well, I think what Lance is saying to us, though, is that they really want to make sure that the employee looks for advancement through certification and time, because if you study psychology, it will tell you that the number one motivation for people is they like the company, they like their boss. Pay is somewhere down the level of priorities. So what we want to do is to make sure that we have an opportunity for employees to advance, whether it's education or the next job up. And then you start over training new people. You want to have an opportunity for people to grow and develop, and that's a number one issue in terms of whoever you are, wherever you're at in your life, how do you intend to grow and develop? So that's important.
And that brings value to the city, of course, Mayor. Those certifications,
and that's the key.
Absolutely. Those for certified employees versus a non-certified. The certified one has gone, they have skin in the game, they've actually gone and done the training, and they know that in order for them to advance, that's what it's going to take. But again, the byproduct of that is the city then actually benefits, and we have a value system in place with that.
That's important.
Mayor?
Yes,
Lance,
Michael?
you talked in terms of incentivizing people to stay. Some of those licenses are required by the state for certain jobs, aren't they?
Yes, we do have certain positions within the water plants and even within some of the utility maintenance. If you're working on the infrastructure, some of those licenses are required. We as a city have required it at certain crew leader positions, which are leadership positions. Some of the plants do have certain levels of licensing that have to be available or on staff. Those specific things are compensated a little bit differently, and their salaries reflect that requirement. What we're actually doing, and in these ones that we incentivized, we're really the more the boots on the ground guys that we're saying, hey, if you want to get more money, here's how you can do it. You can go take this class, the city pays for the class, go take your test, the city pays for the test. If you pass, you get an incentive. And what we're saying is if you just continue to show that initiative, whether it's a 1 class, 3 class, whatever the requirement is, we want to grow our staff and make them a better value for the city.
But my point is, certain work can't be done without those licenses.
That's correct.
State requires licenses for certain types of water production and repair work.
Yes,
Is that
that's correct. It is.
So those licenses are as important as other licenses that we sometimes talk about.
Do I have further questions from council? Thank you, Lance.
Lance, thank you. Good job.
All right, so,
I had
yes.
just one
Tom,
simple one,
please.
and this one's for Lisa. I guess we call this preseason football argument.
Lisa's about to sit down.
Yeah, enjoy that.
You've lost your opportunity.
Right. How many employees, how many open positions do we have? Right now, Lisa, how many open positions do we have? I know Rick's got some in his department. I know Shane's got close to 20.
Across the city right now, I looked at it last week, I want to say there was a total of 60-some-odd positions across all the departments.
In your opinion, do you think those, because we aren't matching what the market's doing around here?
Ooh, that's a hard one.
It's really, we can't keep up with what they can get somewhere else.
Some of them are people who have moved on to bigger and better jobs.
Right.
And that's what you want to have, you have to understand that the city of San Angelo is a small city. People want to grow and develop in their careers. So very often, the way you grow and develop is to move to a better position in another city. So some of them are just what happens in life for every major corporation, every business in America. I have a bigger opportunity, I'm going to take it. So it's not just all about not being able to hire people. It's
right.
Some of them are new positions, less than 2 weeks old. So the issue is how long have they been open? How long are some of them in street and bridge open longer than others? But some of it's the natural process of what happens in a business.
So, Lisa, maybe 60, 70 is what we're saying.
And that may be a little bit high. I'm including all of the temporary seasonals and things that we're trying to fill. But, police has 1 position vacant on their list right now, so does fire. Water had a bunch. It's all over. Street and Bridge has a bunch. So sometimes it's salary related. It depends on the grade of the job. You know, the higher level jobs, the mayor's right, those people do go to other cities. The lower ranked jobs, they go to the oil field or they go wherever they can get the most money. So you'd have to look at our listing every week to see what the factor is that created those vacancies. Okay.
All right, with that, then, Tina, you want to come forward? What, I'm going to say this out loud, and please correct me because my notes probably aren't 100% correct. But what we have decided today is that we're going to take $21,000 out of the police department. We have $53,000 that came from insurance for a total of $74,052. So what I believe we're trying to do is where before we had reduced the revenue from a 3% decrease to 1.5% decrease, so we're going to, which was $290,000. So we're going to reduce that $290,000 by $74,052, which would mean that sales tax dollar amount would be $216,948. So we would be reducing the 1.5 to a different number based off of what I just said.
That's correct, Mayor, and I would say that that's an estimate right there because I just want to make sure that we get the exact number from Nolan Sosa with the police department and use that amount versus just the rounded number of, I think, $26,000. But yes.
It was 21,000.
21,000. But I do want to get that exact number and include that in addition to the $53,052 that you mentioned.
And I have a motion that will accomplish all of that whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay. Motion to approve the ordinance with the exception of reducing the loyalty pay plan for the police department and applying that reduction and the reduction from the estimated health insurance contribution to likewise reduce the sales tax forecast.
That sounds exactly like what I just said.
Verbatim. I mean, that's incredible.
I was writing it down as you were saying that.
Read my mind. Okay, with that said, that is a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any further public comment? With no further comment, would council please vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Tina, you have your direction.
Okay, thank you. I do just want to quickly remind you of what you're authorizing within the budget ordinance. It authorizes our...
He just said. Are you going to repeat what he just said? 'Cause
There's
that's
more
what we just
other
voted
than
on.
the actual budget. You're approving some language in there that I just want to make sure that you're aware of. It authorizes the employee compensation schedules as far as grades and pay ranges. It provides, obviously, for the appropriations of funds, which is what we've been discussing. It reserves the authority to the city council to authorize budget amendments, and then it provides for a lapse of all unencumbered or unobligated funds from the prior fiscal year and a carryover of all appropriations of encumbered, obligated, or restricted funds.
With that, we'll have to discuss it because I don't think we knew we voted on that.
That's why I wanted to bring it to your attention.
So, Brian, you want comment on that? Because it provides some explanation of the following. Provides for lapse of all unencumbered or unobligated funds for prior fiscal year and for carryover of all appropriations of encumbered, obligated, or restricted funds. Tell us what those are, because none of us know.
Yeah, let me explain what that means. So the unencumbered or unobligated funds, that basically what that's saying is that anything that hasn't been spent or encumbered or obligated prior to year end will fall to the fund balance of each of the funds. And then the carryover, all appropriations of encumbered, obligated, or restricted funds, those are the things that we carry over every year at year end. So say you have a contract for service and it's already been encumbered because you know that you're going to have to pay for that contract, then at year end we go ahead and carry that over into the next fiscal year because you have to complete the payment for the contract. Is that
said? Then what is the 2017-18 number that's going to move forward into fund balance?
We won't know that until the end of the year.
Projection is based off of the blue book.
I can't project that right now without having
We're
the last
30
2
days
months
away.
and the carryovers ready to go. But when we do the carryover process, all of those that are not already encumbered, obligated, or restricted are brought to City Council for a request for carryover.
When would that be, Tina, if a request for carryover was brought to the council? When would
We
that
usually
happen?
try to bring that in December.
So that means that you have all final bills, issues, whatever, and the fiscal 17-18 budget complete? Michael,
Yes.
you're shaking your head yes.
Yes. By then, the payments will have gone through the accounts payable process, and she'll know what remains that needs to be carried over and what doesn't need additional authorization to carry over.
Okay. Any further questions on this item? As it relates also to the reserves, go back, please.
Sorry about that.
Goes back to the reserves and to City Council authority to transfer appropriations budgeted, ratifying transfers of appropriations in 2017-18 fiscal year, and amending the budget ordinance accordingly. So,
That's basically saying that you have an authority level when it comes to budget amendments, and so we bring that, when it gets to that authority level, we bring it back to City Council for approval of amending the budget.
over anything not budgeted in 2017-18 and or the new upcoming budget of 18-19. Okay?
So it reserves to the City Council the power to amend or make changes in the budget for municipal purposes, obviously. And it gives authority to the city manager or his designee to make certain adjustments from time to time in or between budget allocations. It authorizes the city manager or his designee to apply for and accept certain grants and execute any related documents, and it provides for filing of the budget. Any questions on that slide?
Billy, you have a question?
So, Tina, on bullet number 2, could you give me an example of that, please?
Yes, when we have salary savings in a certain fund and we need
Police
to.
overtime.
Right, the police overtime that we discussed earlier is a good example of that. So when they have savings in their salary accounts, they can then use that money and send a budget amendment through the finance department and eventually to the city manager, and he would approve using the salary savings to cover something like police overtime or any other department for that matter. So.
Does that hurt the police department that, for example, I'm assuming when they need to spend overtime money, and they need to because next week's a crazy week and they weren't realized that 17 events were being planned, and so they didn't know they were going to need overtime, and now they've got to wait to come to City Council to ask for approval of the overtime,
ma'am.
although they
City
needed it
manager.
yesterday.
City manager.
This puts the authority at the city manager level, and so Daniel's able to approve something like that.
Right. Yes, ma'am. So I mean, the process would be prolonged if we actually went that route.
That's what I'm saying.
So it's within the same fund anyway, within the same department, so that authority, if given to me, I can do that and make sure that it doesn't slow the progress down.
That's all I want to know.
Absolutely.
Don't want to hurt. Okay.
Any other questions on this slide?
Further questions? Okay.
Okay, so we need to conduct a separate vote to ratify the property tax revenue increase reflected in the budget and place the adoption of this tax on the agenda for the September 18th, 2018 regular meeting of the City Council as an action item.
And we'll need to take that as a record vote. So the motion, the second, and then by.
Well, is that item H on the agenda?
That's G2.
G2.
Okay. All right. So we're going to take a vote. Each individual city council member, please ratify that you approve.
We need the motion and the
And
second
no,
first.
okay.
I'd make the motion, Mayor, that we ratify the property tax revenue increase reflected in the budget.
Second? Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye. Sorry.
Sorry.
Councilmember Hebert, will you actually read what's on the screen as part of your motion, and let's re-get that second.
I move that we ratify the property tax revenue increase reflected in the budget and place the adoption of this tax on the agenda for the September 18th, 2018 regular meeting of the City Council as an action item.
Harry, would you second that?
I will second that.
Okay. With that, any public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor?
Well, and let's do it as a record, so let's go.
So do I need to restate that?
No, just SMD1 and how you vote.
Okay.
And then we'll just go
Single member District 1, I vote aye.
Single member District 2, I vote aye.
Single member District 3, I vote aye.
Mayor, I vote aye.
Single member District 4, I vote aye.
Single member District 5, I vote aye.
Single member District 6, I vote aye.
Brian, have we concluded that?
We're good.
That's confusing.
The good news is we get to move on to H. Okay. H is considered second public hearing and introduction of an ordinance levying property taxes for the city of San Angelo for the 2018 tax year. An ordinance fixing and levying ad valorem taxes for the current tax year for use and support of the municipal government of the city of San Angelo, Texas for the 2018-2019 budget year, providing for the assessment and collection thereof, providing when the tax shall become due, providing when the tax shall become delinquent, providing for exemptions, providing for severability, providing for publication on the city-operated website, and providing for an effective date.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. As you'll recall, we had the first public hearing for the introduction of the property tax ordinance at our last meeting. And so this is just the second public hearing for that to allow the public to comment or make their voice heard. Our proposed rate, of course, is remaining the same at .776 per $100 of valuation. And here's just how it's broken out between maintenance and operations and our debt service portions.
Is that debt service number a different number than
No,
we've
ma'am.
used in the past? Okay. With that, do I have a motion?
You have to do this
Mayor, can we
separately
do this
again.
one as a record vote as well?
Yes.
But it can just be a motion to approve it as presented.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
Move it.
A second?
Second.
Mayor, do we need we probably need to ask for public comment since
Get
it
what
is
I'm ready to do right now.
Okay, thank you.
Any public comment? With no public comment, we will take a individual vote, starting with Tommy.
Single member District 1, I vote aye.
Member District 2, I vote aye.
Single member District 3, I vote aye.
Mayor votes aye.
Single member District 4, I vote aye.
Single member District 5, I vote aye.
Single member District 6, I vote aye.
And finally, for me,
Okay, so now item I, first public hearing and introduction of an ordinance amending the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2017 and ending September 30th, 2018 for equipment replacement, grants, reimbursed expenses, and obligations.
okay, thank you, Mayor. So this is a budget amendment that we're bringing to you for consideration and approval. We are proposing to increase our sales tax revenue budget for the current fiscal year by this $1,080,000. As you'll recall, we're projecting to end the year at a surplus of $1.4 million. This one I'm going to take a little time to explain. We are planning to use that additional revenue to fund equipment replacement. We have an opportunity to see savings with our police, with replacing our police vehicles. And so if you have any questions on that part of it, I would defer to Ryan Kramer. But as far as allocating the sales tax revenue, I want to explain this is for 24 vehicles. And so 12 of these vehicles would be what we would normally purchase in the next fiscal year. And the other 12, we would be allocating additional funds for the current fiscal year. And so we're allocating the entire amount this year. And what we would propose to do so that we use next year's allocation that we would have appropriated, we would propose to allocate that money now and then next year not make that transfer into equipment replacement from the general fund, thereby allowing that half of that $540,000 to fall to the fund balance in the next fiscal year. Did I explain that?
Yes, but, okay, so let me just make sure. So we have $1.4 million in additional sales tax revenue.
Yes, ma'am.
We're projecting. Of the $1.4 million, we are asking to spend $488,000 for police cars.
It's It's actually $1,080,000, but again, half of that would have been next year's allocation that we won't spend in the next year.
Okay, so with that, then the difference between the $1.4 million and the $1,080,000 goes where?
It will fall to fund balance if we don't budget for it. I've already used $125,000 of that, though, to fund part of the Concho Riverbank stabilization project.
I thought we had to vote on that.
We have in a previous meeting.
That was taken when y'all first brought that one forward, so it was taken
And
earlier this year.
Okay, so I'm confused about.
We still haven't brought the other one back as far as
That's
the
what I'm asking.
breakdown. Yes, ma'am, that will be at the next meeting as far as looking at the other projects that we could possibly take a look at. That's not included in here, but.
So that's why I'm asking why we would be today asking to put that into fund balance if at next meeting we're going to talk about spending it. So I'm just asking why we're moving
Oh,
it to
and
fund
we-
balance right now when we have potential
Okay.
things we're going to approve September 18th for expenditure.
I'm sorry, let me clarify. That won't fall to fund balance until September 30th at year end. That's the point at which any of that monies would fall to fund balance.
Okay, so all you're asking is on September 30th, the excess revenue on sales tax minus the expenditures that we approve at September 18th would go to fund balance. Is that what you're asking?
Right now, I'm just asking to use $1,080,000 of that surplus revenue to fund the purchase of the police vehicles.
Okay. Everyone clear on that? So with that said, is there a motion? No.
Have more.
Oh, I already did that.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, we're not through.
There's a couple more amendments that we needed to bring to you as well. So there has been some lien revenue that's been received of $55,000 that needs to be used to cover demolition expenses for the Dangerous Buildings Program. WIC grant funds, that they were sent an increase to their allowance for this year of $29,000, and they want to use that to fund some technology capital. Hotel occupancy tax, we are going to have to increase our revenue budget, and the reason for that is that 48% and the 5%, and so when we budget our original revenue budget, we also budget balance so that our expense budget is the same. So when we see increased revenues, then that is obviously going to increase our transfers out to civic events and to the San Angelo Cultural Affairs Council as well. And so we're just increasing our revenue to what we project for it to be flat at year end so that we can fund those other two initiatives.
Let me make sure we're clear on what we're talking about. Because civic events gets 48%, because at a previous meeting we talked about setting budgets and not a percentage. And so the question mark for me today, does council have the ability to say we want to leave the original dollar amount that was budgeted as it is and to take this additional revenue because of hotel occupancy tax and have council decide on how they want to spend it?
I can say that with SACAC, or the Cultural Affairs Council, that's part of a contract and an agreement with them that they will receive 5% of whatever those revenues are. As far as the city department, I would defer to the city attorney to tell us whether we could make that change or not.
Since that last meeting, we've looked to see if we could find any sort of adopted policy or ordinance that addresses that, and there is none. So we're assuming that it is just a policy of council that was set back sometime that can be changed by council.
But can that be changed within this current year's budget, or that be something we would need to change going forward?
I would recommend changing it going forward with the new budget if we're going to make the change.
Okay, with that said, is there anything further on this one before I ask for motion? Since
I have something,
got ahead of
Mayor.
myself.
Mayor.
Yes,
I have
Shirley.
something just from my understanding. So we got more hotel occupancy tax than we expected. And because of the way the current excess is divvied up, this is what we have.
So
The
it's not-
48% going to civic events and the 5% going to cultural affairs.
I wouldn't say it's actually the excess, the way we're divvying it up, but because this is the way that we budget for the civic events and the agreement that we have with the Cultural Affairs Council, that's why we have to allocate that additional revenue out to those two sources, because they're based on percentages rather than a flat dollar amount.
Okay. And so I understand what the mayor's question is, but so right now, though, $317,841 would be added to the civic events budget for the 2017-2018 period?
No, the way that I present it to you right now, it'll actually be a transfer out of the hotel occupancy tax fund, and it will transfer into the civic events fund, but we are not budgeting for that revenue or expense at this time, and so at year end, it would fall to fund balance.
So they don't really get this
It would
money.
go there, but they don't have the spending authorization for it.
I wondered
When
if
it goes
council
to
has
fund
approve
balance,
the
then it
additional
has to be brought
expenditure.
back to council if they want to complete any projects or anything like
That's
that
right. If
with
they
us.
wanna do
Using
any-
this money,
Yes, ma'am.
but the money that has already been approved, they can use that? But
Yes.
it's just this
Yes.
additional revenues? Okay.
And Tina's doing this because in the budget, council's direction is allocate 48%. And so she says, revenue's up, so in order to comply with this direction, I need this budget amendment.
But it's not
This is-
expense approved, it's just budget amendment
That's right.
changes. But no one's authorizing any additional expenses, we're just moving it from one account to
One
other
fund to another,
accounts.
yes.
That's what, it's moving funds, it's not approving expenditures.
So on the previous slide on the liens, that is the same, yeah, the 55,000, that's the same thing. It cannot be spent unless it comes back to the,
That is not the same thing. Right here, we've already received these monies, so we are budgeting for that revenue with an offsetting expense for the demolition.
So this one is not an approved, you're asking to approve the expense, unlike the others where we're asking for approval to move it from one fund to another. What about the other one, the WIC grant and the technology capital? Because we're not, in the presentation, you're not mentioning to us the difference between
These are all
transfers and approving expenses.
So every single one
Technically,
of
those
these are
transfers are
approving a revenue and an expense.
Say that
Here,
again.
you're approving sales tax revenue increase and an offsetting expense for equipment replacement.
for right now.
Yes,
In
ma'am.
this current budget?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
all right,
In the 2018 budget.
okay.
Yes. Here, you're approving revenue for liens with the offsetting expense of demolition. Here, you're approving revenue from the WIC grant with the offsetting expense of technology capital. And here, you're approving revenue for hotel occupancy tax with the offsetting expense for that fund of the civic events transfer out and the payment to the Cultural Affairs Council.
No approval to spend the money.
No approval, you're approving to spend it out of the hotel occupancy tax fund, but not out of the civic events fund.
Or the cultural affairs.
The Cultural Affairs Council, they spend it as they see fit, and they come back to council and update you on that.
It's a separate organization.
Yes.
And
No, we all realize that, but in the big picture, the conversation that was just said, we asked about that, and it was said that they could not spend it without coming back to council. That's why this clarification is important.
We were referring to the civic events fund when we said that, because they would be required to come back to the city council before they could use those funds.
That's important, because I thought it meant both of those
So did
things
we.
when,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just so that the citizens understand, and this council up here understands, that from the mayor's direction, and I certainly support this, we want to go back to a specific amount to both of these individual organizations beginning fiscal year 19. That means whatever we've got to do in the next couple of meetings, we want to move that
I
direction.
believe the contract with the Cultural Affairs Council will not have expired at that time, so we may need,
We would have to
Need to figure out
renegotiate
how to
that
make it
contract.
happen.
so that would require an amendment of some kind to the agreement with them.
Is Billy, Lane, Bill, you, yes, is that?
I'm fine,
Okay,
thank
Lane?
you.
Lucy? All right, with that said,
Mayor, if I
then-
may, I'm
yes,
sorry.
you may.
Can we go back to the $1,080,000? I just want 80 right there. I just want to make sure that we're clear, because we're looking at sales tax revenues and the general equipment replacement. We have another item that's coming up next, Tina, and it talks about those 24 additional units of those vehicles at a total price of $736,000.
That's why we kept asking the question.
I want to make sure
because
that we're
not
clear on.
clear.
We want to make sure we're very clear on what this actually general equipment replacement means.
Yes, and I think that'll be a question for Ryan Kramer.
Okay, Ryan?
But then what is the difference between that and this number?
There's other items in there besides the police cars, right?
That's what it sounded like, so I want to make sure
We
it's
need
just
to
clear.
know what that is,
Correct.
because we're not clear.
Correct.
Good morning, Council. Ryan Kramer, Fleet Services. Yes, that's correct. $1,080,000 is what we need to budget to build those cars, including the vehicles. Approximately $736,000 will be expended to buy the vehicles themselves. The remainder of that needs to be budgeted for the upfit equipment that we need to install in them: light bars, cages, computers, et cetera.
So the difference between 736,000 and $1,080,000 is,
$344,000.
so $344,000 it will cost to take the vehicles purchased and to make them usable for the police department.
Yes, ma'am, that's right.
Any questions? Okay.
Move to approve as presented.
Ryan, do we have to go through any of these line by line, or just a motion to approve all of those is sufficient?
Yes.
And we don't
the
need
way the motion
individual council vote?
I'm sorry?
Do we need individual council vote?
Not on this
All
one.
right, so there's a motion, a second. Public comment, please. With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes 7-0. Then item J is consider increasing award of RFB FS-01-18 patrol utility vehicles to Jim Bass Ford, San Angelo, Texas, in the amount of $736,080 for the purchase of 24 additional units and authorizing the city manager to execute any related documents.
Morning again, Ryan Kramer with Fleet Services. This is fairly simple in nature. We're requesting council to approve the increase of the award to Jim Bass Ford for the purchase of these vehicles. We have a currently contracted vendor, which is Jim Bass Ford, for the purchase of patrol units. We've already purchased 12 units with that previous award as awarded by council. We're asking to simply increase that award for the contract so that we can retain the pricing there by the amount of 24 vehicles.
I certainly support the 24, but I'm surprised in 7 days we went from 12 to 24. I'm just asking.
Yeah, the 12 units that we bought was back before New Year's even, and that was for the 12 vehicles that were allocated for that fiscal year. And so the 24 we're considering now are not only the 12 that we intend to purchase for next fiscal year 19, but 12 additional units to help offset aged equipment and the potential to lose money because of price increases on those vehicles.
Yes, Harry.
Thank you. I guess I take a look at this price escalation. Is this specific quote from Jim Bass for this next model year, fiscal year, 2019, or is this just an estimate?
So our contract with vendors like this entails that they notify us of any escalations within a certain time period of the contract expiring. This vendor did that. They notified us that there would be an escalation based on the manufacturer, in this case Ford, increasing and changing the way they build those vehicles. That is going to cause an increase in price, and so therefore we're seeing this exact quote given to me by Jim Bass Ford as the increase.
I haven't put it on a calculator, but that's more than 16%. That's way, way, way out there. You know, when you get that kind of price escalation, shouldn't we be going out for bids from other organizations?
But I thought that if we made this buy before the 18th of September, we maintained the contracted price. So what we're approving today is not the increased price, Harry. If we make this purchase before the 18th of September, we get the old $30,670, correct?
That's exactly why we're
That's
here
why
today.
we're voting today. Your comments are valid, they're correct, but that's why we want to vote today. So
Thank
we
you.
get the contracted price. Okay, with that said, does council have further comments or questions on this? With no further comments or questions, do I have a motion?
To approve.
Lane moves to approve, and the second is?
Second.
By Tom E. Hebert, and I got it out. The
Close.
mouth is
Somebody
really
on the left
dry
side.
today.
Class
Somebody
of
on the left side.
1975,
Yeah.
Texas A&M.
Zyrtec give you cotton mouth, so sorry, but thank you for the rain. Okay, so there's a motion and a second, and now I have an opportunity for public comment. With that opportunity denied, we will move on to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Thank you. We will now move into closed session. Executive session under provision of Government Code Title V, Open Government Ethics, Subtitle A, Open Government Chapter 551, Open Meetings, Subchapter D, exceptions to requirement that meetings be open under the following sections. A, Section 551.0871, to discuss or deliberate regarding commercial or financial information that the governmental body has received from a business prospect that the governmental body seeks to have, locate, stay, or expand in or near the territory of the governmental body and with which the governmental body is conducting economic development negotiations relating to MedHab LLC. Item B, Section 551.072, deliberations about real property regarding 30 West Tuig. And item C which is 5510712, consultation with attorney on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas disciplinarian rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter regarding item 7A, curbside recycling discussion. With that, we will be closed for closed sections for about 45 minutes to an hour. Item 9, follow-up and administrative issues. A, consider items discussed in executive session if needed. Harry?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion authorizing the city manager to negotiate a lease for the property located at 30 West Toohey.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Item B, consider approving the following board nomination. Design and Historic Review Commission, Clay Engdahl, SMD 1, Downtown Development Organization, to an unexpired term ending September 2019. Do I have a motion?
So move.
A second? Second. All in, public opinion? With no public opinion, a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Any opposed? With none opposed, motion passes 7-0. Item C, announcements and consideration of future agenda items. Harry, I think you want something.
Yes. I have a town hall meeting scheduled next Tuesday, September 11th at Fort Concho School to discuss the proposed closure of a portion of Avenue D, that portion that goes through the fort. And we'll start at 5:30 that afternoon and have representatives both from the fort, school district, and the city.
I know this last week I had a phone call about a mother and a child almost being run over on Avenue D. It's a real serious health, safety issue. I mean, just last week. Okay.
One more
Yes,
announcement,
please.
Mayor. Next Tuesday is the 11th, which is 9/11. The Firefighters Association, working with the fire department, are actually sponsoring this year's 9/11 Memorial, which will be held at the 9/11 Memorial site at 10 a.m. in the morning. So we definitely want to invite all the public to be there. Of course, city council members. Mayor, they may be asking
They've
you.
already asked me to
they
be
did
there.
good.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that's out there. So again, that's next Tuesday, 9/11, at the 9/11 Memorial at 10 o'clock in the morning.
With that said, are there any further announcements? With no further announcements, may I have a motion for adjournment?
Move we adjourn.
In a second.
Second.
With any public opinion? Oh, with no public opinion, may we have a vote?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Meeting adjourned at 12:44 on September the 4th.